Can't believe I lost it. The agenda he just handed me. I don't know how. We don't have much on the agenda tonight. It's not like it's.
Really? Did you read your whole Bible?
Here you go, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Are we ready, Dan?
Just one moment, Mr. Chair.
That was previous. Okay, that's that one.
Mr. Chair, if you wouldn't mind, I'll just give an overview kind of the format for tonight's meeting, if you don't mind.
Go for it, please.
So thank you everybody for attending tonight. This is a very full agenda. We have four public hearing items that have been, notices have been published for those items for tonight's meeting. There are public hearings on a proposed group daycare home use, on two different rezoning requests and a set of zoning ordinance text amendments. Then there's an old business set of items regarding the Belleville Yacht Club. There's a proposed special approval recommendation for a marina land use as well as a site plan for that use. And then we will get into tonight's new business, which includes the group daycare home special land use approval, the group daycare home site plan, one of the rezoning petitions, and a proposed modification to a landscaping plan for the Subaru site on Michigan Avenue. So just to give an overview of the agenda, that first set of items will be public hearing items where we'll just take public comment on the specific items that are addressed by the chair. And then we'll get into the new business items that will be involving more discussion on the planning commissioner's end. So with that being said, I would like to defer to the chair to formally kick off tonight's meeting.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to open the call to order the Charter Township of Van Buren Planning Commission for Wednesday, June 14th, 2023. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, with that under control, next item, roll call, please.
Here state the following: Medina Atchison, excused absent. Sherry Budd. Here. Brian Cullen.
Here.
Bernard Grant.
Here.
Jeff Jar.
Here.
Jackson Paul.
Okay, with that under, we have presented with the agenda for tonight's meeting. Do we have a motion to accept the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the agenda as submitted, noting that this is the agenda that was presented by staff yesterday.
Support.
I have a motion by Commissioner Jar, supported by Commissioner Budd, for the approval of the agenda as presented. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? We have an approval of the agenda. Next item, minutes.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Jar.
I move to approve the minutes from the regular meeting of May 24th, 2023 as submitted.
Motion by Commissioner Jar, support by Commissioner Budd. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And we have approval of the minutes. First item up tonight is a public hearing. It is case 23023, Danielle Sizemore, Group Daycare Home, Special Land Use Review. A request by Danielle Sizemore to change an existing daycare family home to a daycare group home as defined per section 2.102A60B of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance. The parcel is zoned R1A, single-family residential. Daycare group home is a special land use in the R1A, single-family residential district, and the proposed special land use requires a public hearing. This hearing is being held in accordance with Article 12, Chapter 3, Special Land Use Review of the zoning ordinance. The project is proposed to be located at 42127 Salem Court. Parcel ID number 83104007100. Do we have a motion to open the public hearing?
Through the chair, I make a motion, we open the public hearing to hear case number 23023, the daycare group home.
Support.
We have a motion to open the public hearing by Commissioner Bud and support by Commissioner Jar. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, the public hearing is open. Do we have any public comments concerning the daycare?
Yes.
Forward, state your name at the microphone and address, please.
And Mr. Chair, apologies for the interruption. This is Ms. Sizemore. She is the applicant for tonight. So Ms. Sizemore, we will have more. If you would like to give a full presentation, we'll have a new business item that'll pertain to this request as well. So we can go through more of your introduction of the site at that time if you'd like.
You just want my.
What we would like at this time is if there's any public that has any non-applicants in favor of or opposed to.
Hello, I'm Cheryl Duda, and I live at 13744 Milton Drive. It's right around the corner from Salem Court. And I love the children. When they walk in the street, they wave at me. I sit outside all day. You can see I'm tan. The kids love me. They come and give me a hug. It's a beautiful family. Mrs. Sizemore takes very good care of the children. She has a lot of help. She's beautiful. The basement is beautiful. Her home is beautiful. I couldn't tell you enough that she can handle more kids.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other comments?
I will
Yes.
just add, the current home, there's not much traffic. I'm out walking the dog a lot in the morning and the evening, and there's not much traffic here or at the group home that's at the corner of Camden Drive and Country Walk Boulevard. There's a home there, daycare center. There's not much traffic. It doesn't hurt.
Okay, thank you.
Chair,
Yes.
could the previous speaker state his name for the record?
Yes, could we have your name, sir, please?
Yeah, I'm Mark Powell, and I live at 13744 Milton Drive also.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. I am Diane Bell. I am a neighbor of Danielle Sizemore. My address is 42084 Salem Court, and I have been a neighbor of theirs for about 15 years. I can't say enough. Everybody loves the whole family, not just Danielle, but her husband Rodney. The children have a fabulous place to play, to be nurtured. All the neighbors look out for everybody, including if the children were out playing or riding their little go-karts in the circle. We live at the end of the, that goes around like that. Everybody looks out after everybody, so it's kind of like a community affair where everybody looks out after everybody. So she's great. The children are safe and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Do we have any other comments?
Hi, Corey Gibson, 43160 East Huron River Drive. Very happy to hear that there's somebody doing something for the community in the area. One of the comments that was brought up, and I just want to make sure we're covered on this, is if we're expanding the amount of children that are in the household, somebody mentioned nice basement or whatever, do we make sure there's a egress issue covered there? That's just my only comment in the interest of child safety. But I'm happy to hear that she's doing great things for the community.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
May I address that?
During your presentation, if you would like, we'll get you.
I just have to remember his question.
We've got it. Do we have any other public comment? Any other public comment? Anything on Zoom?
Thanks for the cue, Mr. Chair, because we do have Zoom participation tonight. I do see there are 5 people on the Zoom. And if you have any comments throughout this meeting, if you would just raise your hand or enter the question or comment into the virtual chat. This would be for the Danielle Sizemore group daycare home proposed use. Any comments out there on Zoom? I do not see any comments for this case.
Okay, any other comments?
Through the chair, I make a motion, we close the public hearing.
What type of comment do y'all want from me? How our daycare is, or do I support it? Yes, I do support Ms. Danielle Sizemore.
We need your name and address, please.
Or my name is Tamika, Tamika, last name Williams. Address 42128 Salem Court.
Go forth.
Oh, okay, yeah. I think it's very positive for her to have a daycare and support not only the neighborhood kids, but, you know, just the surrounding community. So I do support it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Daima Hutchings, and I am her daughter. I think my mom should also have a daycare. She literally loves kids. She kidnaps kids all the time, figuratively, of course. She sees cute kids in the grocery store. She's like, you know what? You want to come over to my house? And the parents, they never, for some reason, think she's a stranger, like stranger danger. They never say that. They're like, yeah, take her. Free babysitter, woo! So, safely, I say let her have the kids.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Judd.
Bud, support.
I'm sorry. Support from Commissioner Jar. I apologize. All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, takes care of item number 1. Public hearing number 2. Case 22058, Cameron Smith, 16355 Haggerty Road, rezoning request. A request by owner Cameron Smith to rezone 16355 Haggerty Road, described as a parcel ID number V12583-142-99-0001-000 from R1B Single Family Residential District to AG Agricultural and Estates. The parcel is located on the east side of Haggerty Road between Riggs Road and Savage Road. Do we have a motion to open the public hearing?
Mr. Chair, I move to open the public hearing.
Commissioner Jar, to open the public hearing, motion to open. Do we have a support?
Support.
Support by Commissioner Grant. All in favor signify by aye. 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 Opposed? Okay. It is now open. Do we have any public comment concerning the rezoning request? Do we have any comments on Zoom regarding the rezoning request?
Mr. Chair, there are no comments on Zoom.
And for our final call, any comments? Seeing none, can we have a
Through the chair, make a motion to close the public hearing.
Support.
motion by Commissioner Bud, support by Commissioner Jar? All those in favor signify by aye. 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 Opposed? Okay, the public hearing is closed. Item number 3, case 23021, Robert Sloan, Van Born Road property, another rezoning request. A request by Mark Drain on behalf of owner Robert Sloan to rezone the parcel described as parcel ID number V 125-83-009-99-0002-000 from M1 Light Industrial to M2 General Industrial. The parcel is 24.48 acres in area. The parcel is located on the north side of Van Born Road, east of Sheldon Road. Do we have a motion to open public hearing?
Mr. Chair, I move to open the public hearing.
Commissioner Jar moves to open the public hearing. Do we have support?
Support.
Support by Commissioner Grant. All those in favor to open the hearing signify by aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Do we have any public comment concerning the rezoning request? Any comments concerning the rezoning request? Anything on Zoom, Commissioner, or Director Power?
Mr. Chair, there are no comments on Zoom.
And a last call, any comments for the rezoning request?
Through the chair, make a motion to close the public hearing.
Support.
Motion by Commissioner Bud, support by Commissioner Jar. All those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, public hearing is closed. And the last item for public hearing, zoning ordinance text amendments, detached single-family residential dwelling height regulations. Proposed amendments that will modify, excuse me, the maximum allowable height for detached single-family dwellings to allow all detached single-family dwellings to be 2.5 stories in height or 35 feet in height. The amendments will include updates to sections 3.106, covering R1A, R2A, R1B, and R1C single-family residential districts, and 3.107, RM, multiple dwelling residential district, 3.109, AG, agricultural and estate district, and 4.102, schedule of regulations. Do we have a motion to open the public hearing?
Moved.
And, okay, moved by Commissioner Jar, support by Commissioner Bud. To open the public hearing, all in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, do we have any public comment concerning this item? Do we have any comments concerning this item? Is there anyone on Zoom, Commissioner, or Director Power?
There are no comments on Zoom still.
And one last call. Any comments concerning this item? Seeing none,
Through the chair, make a motion to close.
Support.
motion by Commissioner Bud, support by Commissioner Jar to close the public hearing. All in favor signify by aye. Those opposed? And public hearing is closed. On to old business. Item number 1, case 22-059, Belleville Yacht Club, Marina Special Approval Recommendation. A request by the Belleville Yacht Club for a site plan review and special approval to construct a marina as defined under section 3.120B15 of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance, including 2 dock structures with lengths of 85.3 feet, each containing a single dock stem with 3 connecting docks. The site is zoned Belleville Lake Shoreline District B, non-single family residential, BLB, and the adjacent upland parcel is zoned R1C, single family residential. Marinas are a use that require special approval in the BLB district. A public hearing regarding this issue was held in accordance with section 3.120 F3, Belleville Lake Shoreline District Belleville Lake Shoreline District approval process of the zoning ordinance on January 11th, 2023. The project is proposed to be located in Township Lake property adjacent to 831 East Huron River Drive. Parcel ID number 83-088-99-0005-000 on the north side of East Huron River Drive between Loza Lane and Evelyn Court. We first will hear from a presentation by the township staff. Director Power.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me just take a moment to get the plan projected onto the screen. As I load up this presentation, I will probably only make comment during the first item. I'll try to summarize all of my special approval and site plan review comments in one summary report, if that's okay with the Planning Commission and the chair. And then if we can always revisit any questions you have for me during the second item. As mentioned, the Belleville Yacht Club has applied for site plan review and special approval to construct a marina as defined under section 3.120B15 of the zoning ordinance. This plan that you see on the screen is reflective of a revised site plan dated May 26th, which I'll refer to as the revised site plan. This plan includes 2 dock structures, each containing a single dock stem with 3 connecting docks. Upon completion, the project is proposed to replace 2 floating dock structures, which sets the tone for this review. There were 2 sets of floating dock structures that had been in place prior to the year 2020 when one of those was partially removed and a reconstruction began. There was an issue with permitting, code enforcement that resulted in an agreement with the court to have the township look at this and review a path for a viable review for this project. And the applicant was cooperative with staff in helping to get that process started. The initial process was involving reviewing possible ordinance language, and what we found was eventually that the length of the docks would require what's called a special exception under our Belleville Lake Shoreline District's ordinance. And so I mention that because that's a significant portion of this review dealt with the length of the 2 dock structures, which I'll touch on more a little bit later in my comments here. Kind of zooming back out to the site and the surrounding property around the site. As the chair mentioned, this site, Upland, is zoned R1C. There's a private club use that's in the R1C zoning district, Upland. The adjacent lake property is zoned what's called BLB, Belleville Lake Shoreline District B, non-single family residential. There's a distinction between single family residential uses and non-single family residential uses upland and what those allow for in the adjacent lake property. With the BLB, non-single family residential use, marinas and multi-docking facilities can be pursued. This specific use falls into the category of what's called a marina. It's not, doesn't meet the definition of what you'd call a non-commercial multi-docking facility. So it is being reviewed as a marina. It's not a conventional marina, which I'll discuss more in my report because it does not involve things like fueling, and it does not involve rental of slips to off-site customers, but it is still nonetheless referred to as a marina under our zoning ordinance. To summarize, one of the components of this request, again, is to go over the length issue. The initial plan, which was first reviewed by the Planning Commission formally in January of 2023, had 2 docking structures that had a length of 120 feet. Anything greater than 40 feet in length would require an exception from an ordinance rule, which is section 3.120D5 of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance, because that section of the zoning ordinance limits the length of docks to 40 feet. Our zoning ordinance directs any request for exceptions under those types of standards on township lake property to our Board of Zoning Appeals. There were several meetings between the Board of Zoning Appeals and the Planning Commission in which this item was addressed. This was first reviewed by the Board of Zoning Appeals in a public hearing in January 10th. The Planning Commission initially reviewed the marina and special site plan review request on January 11th. The Planning Commission then provided comment on the dock length of 120 feet as proposed on February 8th. And at that meeting, they recommended against docks being that length. And that was the direction that was provided to the Board of Zoning Appeals. There was a public hearing, or a second public meeting with the Board of Zoning Appeals on March 14th. The decision on the case at that time was postponed, and I should mention that by that time, the plans were adjusted with the length that you now see of 85.3 feet. So the BZA took those plans that were made based on the comments provided by the Planning Commission to have a shorter length. BZA took those plans, postponed their decision on March 14th, and then eventually voted for approval in a 4-3 vote on May 9th. So there are standards for approval of the length that I won't go into in great detail, but there were 5 criteria that the majority of BZA members had to find would be met with that length, and the majority of BZA members voted in favor of that. The reason that this is really important to bring up for this case is that the dock length standard is a local zoning ordinance standard. The request for relief from that standard was something that had to be appealed to the BZA here in Van Buren Township. It was a ordinance that this commission would otherwise have purview over, and their limit would have been 40 feet. But it was the BZA's role to consider an exception from that. And so when the BZA made their decision with the dock length at 85.3 feet, that's what the length is now set at for what's considered acceptable under the review process that you have before you. So in that sense, the length issue is something that the BZA has addressed and is not part of this aspect of the review. Now, the project will go forward to state and the State of Michigan Eagle and FERC, and there will be their own review processes for all of this application. But that is just to say for the length issue that has been addressed by the BZA. That being said, there are many components to the special approval for the marina and for the site plan application that I'd like to give an overview of that are open for discussion and consideration by the Planning Commission. So the first thing I'd like to discuss is the application requirements for submittals for projects on the Belleville Lake Shoreline District's properties or in Belleville Lake. Those include a completed application form, a site plan, a copy of an existing survey or photographs of the existing conditions, plans, elevations, and section drawings to adequately demonstrate the height, length, width, and distance to lot lines of an improvement, the description of existing shoreline features, any description of any shoreline stabilization, and an indication of an application to Eagle. The only comment I have on those submittals is that everything has been submitted adequately according to the zoning ordinance. The one item I will mention is that a completed application for review by Eagle and FERC, if required, must be provided prior to full township lakeshore authorization being granted just prior to construction. I'd like to now go over special approval criteria and for the Planning Commission and people attending tonight, just as a reminder, one of the actions by the Planning Commission that's being requested is a recommendation on the special approval. The other action would be a potential consideration of approval of the site plan itself. So on the special approval criteria, there are several criteria that have to be met. The first set of these criteria come from our standard set of special approval criteria in section 12.306 of the zoning ordinance. The first is that the proposed use can promote the use of land in a socially and economically desirable manner for those persons who will use the proposed land use or activity, for those landowners and residents who are adjacent, and for the township as a whole. In reviewing this criterion, I'd encourage the Planning Commission to consider whether, due to the proposed use, Are there benefits or impediments to socially and economically desirable use of the site? Are there benefits or impediments to socially and economically desirable use of the land adjacent to the site? And are there benefits or impediments to the socially and economically desirable use of land township-wide? Also, due to the proposed use, are these benefits or impediments increased or in relation to the current existing use of the site? So remember that this is an alteration to a previous configuration that had floating docks and a similar count of boats. The second criterion is that the use is necessary for the public convenience at this location. In considering this criterion, I'd encourage the Planning Commission to consider whether the proposed use provides a distinct service or activity for public convenience at this site that would not be fulfilled if it was not situated at this location. Does the proposed use maintain, enhance, or diminish a service or activity that currently exists at this location? The third criterion is whether the use is compatible with the adjacent uses of land in terms of things like minimizing offsite impacts, including noise, light, or obstructions due to navigation, whether the proposed use maintains, enhances, or diminishes current navigational patterns around the site and existing adjacent sites relative to existing conditions, and whether the proposed use maintains, improves, or worsens offsite noise and light impacts relative to existing conditions. I do note here that the site will maintain 21-foot setbacks on both sides, which is to be compared. If you look in your packet, and I'll try to get to that page here, there was a drawing provided that shows the existing, previous existing configuration of the docks. This is a good comparison of what was there before as opposed to what's being proposed. You can see that there was a 6-foot setback to the side lot line, somewhere around that on the west side lot line here. You now have a 21-foot setback because you now have these permanent dock structures that will be facing more inward with potentially dockside mooring, subject to Eagle's approval. In exchange, of course, for the greater length of dockage that was reviewed by the Board of Zoning Appeals. So when you look at something like that, you might consider the navigability both in the lake as approaching the docks, traveling in the lake, as well as access to and from the adjacent lake parcels on the sides. The fourth criterion for special approval is that this use is so designed, located, and proposed to be operated that the public health, safety, and welfare will be protected. Again, this relates to items such as navigability around the lake, access to and from adjacent properties, offsite impacts. I note that the applicant has committed to having no fueling, repair, or more intensive marina activities associated with conventional marinas, and that Eagle will review this application as well. But again, this would be a criterion that you want to ask questions like whether the proposed use minimizes offsite impacts. The fifth criterion for special approval is whether the use can adequately be served by public services and facilities without diminishing or adversely affecting public services and facilities to existing land uses in the area. This site is connected to a parcel that's served by public water, sewer, and service, gas and electric service. I believe this criterion has been met. The next is whether the use will not cause injury to other property in the neighborhood in which it is to be located. Things you might consider when asking that question are whether the proposed use causes injury to other property in the neighborhood, whether relative to the existing use, the proposed use will cause additional injury. I will mention that again, the floating docks will be replaced by permanent dock structures, and it otherwise maintains an established multi-boat docking use affiliated with this site. Lastly, whether the use will consider the natural environment and help conserve natural resources. One of the things I mentioned here is that the applicant, again, indicated there would be no fueling at this site. The Planning Commission might consider also the configuration of the site in terms of the amount of watercraft that are proposed. As configured here, the applicant shows kind of a typical configuration that involves these 28 by 8 foot boats and 16 boat parking spaces as shown on the more detailed version of this plan. I believe the applicant has indicated that that's the same number of boats that would have docked on the existing floating docks. Just in terms of that's something that is a conversation that can be applied to multiple criteria, but also to the kind of the intensity of boating on the lake and the impacts thereof. Now that I've gone through the general special approval criteria, I'm going to just touch on the Belleville Lake Shoreline District approval process. There are standards in Section 3.120 F4 of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance that must be met. And those include that the application must demonstrate compliance with general development standards in the Belleville Lake Shoreline District ordinance, that the structure shall not unreasonably interfere with the adjacent property owners or public uses enjoyment of the waters of Belleville Lake, that the structures will not create a risk to health, safety, and welfare of persons who use the lake. I do have one recommended condition related to that point, which is that the applicant must provide specifications for reflective tape or other safety markings meant to enhance the visibility and navigability around the proposed docks prior to construction. The structures must be constructed of materials that will not impair water quality, water flow, or water levels, and I believe the applicant has some sample materials with him tonight. That to the extent feasible, the structure shall protect and enhance the scenic, recreational, environmental quality of Belleville Lake. On that point, in terms of scenic quality and in regard to some of the other criteria, I did request as another condition of approval that the applicant provide images or elevation drawings to further illustrate how the dock structures will appear from a side profile view on the lake. Marinas and non-commercial multi-docking facilities shall be separated from one another to avoid overcrowding and excessive boat traffic on the lake. I'll summarize. There's more extensive analysis in my report, but I'll just mention the nearest formal marina that staff is aware of is the Sandy's Marina site, about 1.4 miles away. There are several multi-docking sites around the lake, but this site is not particularly close to the other marinas or multi-docking sites. Consideration shall be given to maintaining consistency with the upland zoning and land use. And uses approved shall be consistent with the primary goal of permitting reasonable use by lake residents and lake landowners. Through a series of notes and submittals, the applicant has demonstrated compliance with the Belleville Lake Shoreline District development regulations with one item that had to be addressed through the exception process, but I have a kind of a list of those requirements and conditions, which include that no boats, boat lifts, cradles, or hoists will be constructed, no buildings or covered structures will be constructed on the lake, that all uses and structures comply with the standards and requirements of Section 3.120D, that no private ramps or launches intended to provide access from multiple non-abutting lake lot owners are provided, no signs built other than those approved by the township and necessary for public safety, that these are limited for the non-commercial use and quiet enjoyment of the abutting frontage lot owners, lessees, renters, and their invited guests, that any facilities here are subject to the terms of FERC, that no dock will be placed or maintained in a location where it can present hazard to navigation or create a risk that boats will run aground, that no person will install or maintain a dock except on shoreline or bottomlands abutting a frontage in which they have an ownership interest, that all docks will be positioned perpendicular to the shore and in a manner that does not reasonably encroach on the use and enjoyment of the lake by neighboring lots, that dry docks and dry land storage of watercraft will not be permitted, that no boat or other portion thereof will be launched, stored, moored, or docked within 5 feet of the side lot lines, that all docks will be kept in good repair, that the marina will comply with all applicable construction standards and the permit requirements of Eagle, and that all docks, hoists, and similar structures shall be under common ownership and of a common design, that there will be no fueling, and the last item on that list is that there had to be relief from section 3.120D5. One other item that I would request the Planning Commission to consider is that the Planning Commission has discretion to authorize a use that occupies greater than 60% of the shoreline frontage. In this case, the frontage of the dock structures is 90.6 feet, or 68.6% of the property's 132 feet. This extension appears reasonable to staff. It is something that the Planning Commission has to authorize if it goes above 60%. Now that I've gone through a very lengthy discussion of the different submittal requirements and approval standards, I would like to just mention that there's inclusion in your packet of a full list of submittals that were provided over the course of this review. I hope the Planning Commission had a chance to look at them more closely. I'm glad to answer any questions about them, but if you have questions in your print packet, that's starting on page 24. So I won't go through all of those submittals. I think over the course of several meetings, many of those have been reviewed in the public, so glad to go over any of them, but again, I won't go in detail right now unless asked. So I'd like to take this moment to say what the next steps are and what the potential recommendation would be. There were a series of required steps in this process. The Planning Commission first had to provide preliminary review and comment on the special exception request. That was completed on February 8th. The BZA had to take action on the special exception, and that was completed on May 9th. The Planning Commission is now being asked to take action on the requested special approval use recommendation to the Board of Trustees and on the site plan aspect of this submittal. If that occurs, the Board of Trustees could take action on the special approval use. That could happen at the next available board meeting, which would be Tuesday the 20th, if the project gets approved tonight, or it could happen at a later date. But then, only then, if the board approves the special approval use, agency review and approvals from Eagle and FERC would then also be required, and then there's final township authorization after that point. Based on the information provided in the plans dated May 26th and other submittals, and pending the Planning Commission's findings on the special approval criteria and the site plan criteria, the Planning Commission may vote to recommend special approval to the Board of Trustees and may vote to approve the proposed site plan if they find that the site plan meets the development regulations for Belleville Lake Shoreline Districts under Section 3.120D, that the site plan meets the approval criteria of Section 3.120F4, and that the site plan meets the special land use approval criteria of Section 12.306, which I covered broadly in my report. If the Planning Commission recommends approval of the proposed special approval use and the site plan, I recommend the following conditions. That as a recommended condition of approval, the applicant must provide specifications for reflective tape and other safety markings meant to enhance visibility of and navigability around the proposed docks. That a completed application for review by Eagle, and if required, FERC must be provided prior to full township lakeshore authorization being granted. And that the construction is subject to any necessary approvals from Eagle and FERC. That all voluntary conditions of use as provided on the submitted site plan, including that the use shall not be used for fueling, shall be a binding condition of special approval. That special approval must be obtained from the Township Board of Trustees, and that all conditions of the BZA granted on May 9th shall be met. That the use of land must otherwise comply with Article 6 of Chapter 42 of the Van Buren Township Code of Ordinances, which pertains to the environment. That the Planning Commission must agree that the proposed frontage coverage of 68.6% is acceptable. That the dock surface material as presented is acceptable to the Planning Commission or deferred to staff judgment to be acceptable. And as a recommended condition of approval, the applicant is requested to provide images and/or an elevation view to further illustrate how the dock structures will appear from a side profile view. The applicant is here tonight. There are also comments that have been received I know, just as a point of order, the public hearing, of course, as mentioned, was held on January 11th. So there is no formal public hearing tonight that would have happened earlier in the agenda. However, there have been many comments over the life of this case, and I will mention that there were several comments from Mr. Jeffrey Riggs provided today that have been transmitted to all of our planning commissioners, as well as copies of those comments in hard copy tonight, as well as some images. And I'll defer to the chair. Typically, there's a space for some public comment if need be on these agendas. But without further ado, I'll turn it to the Planning Commission and then presumably to the applicant to speak further on the case.
Do we have a presentation by the applicant? Please state your name and address.
Scott Jones, 11696 Juniper Drive. I'm here on behalf of the Belleville Yacht Club. So two of the requests were for pictures regarding what the dock would look like. So, Dan, I'm gonna hit the wrong one there. It's upside down too, right? So we photoshopped in the current dock is located on the top, and we photoshopped in the bottom. So that doesn't exist today. There's floating docks there and some pipes that were started back when the dispute began. So that just shows you the expected condition when we're complete. And then this is the side elevation of the existing dock. So this is the current dock that's there that goes out 85.3 feet. Sorry.
Thank you.
You don't have to stand. So that is the current structure, womanized deck with cleats there you can see to moor the boat. And we're proposing the exact same construction for the adjacent dock. And I can make these, I have extra copies too that I can submit. Other than that, I think Dan covered everything, so thank you, Director Powers. I won't go any further. I think everything's been discussed, and so we're here tonight to try to get the approval for the special marina designation, and then ultimately site plan approval, so we can move on to the trustees.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any comments?
I do have some questions, and I have some. I do have some comments as well. I think I may have missed something at the beginning, and I don't have a long history with this project that maybe Director Dan Powers can. At the beginning, you mentioned something about court action. What was this concerning?
This was the pertaining to the beginning of construction when there were two sets of floating dock structures, which are the same that you see drawn in the packet. The westernmost dock structure was removed, and there was some construction that began on the more permanent dock structure that you see today. And so there was a stop work. There's a ticket and a resulting court action that dismissed that with the condition that there would be a review by the township to establish a valid review process for potentially allowing that, not allowing that exactly to remain, but to provide a valid review process for the formalization of the proposed permanent docks.
So that kind of leads into my next question. So you're saying a portion of what's out there already will remain, or what's out there will remain as part of this construction?
That's, I think, the idea. Is that right, Mr. Jones? So,
Yeah, the west dock is really, it's almost completely constructed. There's a couple boards that need added, but it's an existing structure. And then we would build a duplicate of that, a mirror image on the east side.
So
That would give us a proposed configuration.
So was the ticket for the materiality of the dock, and what was it for exactly?
it was just to, because there was work without a permit initially.
It was unpermitted construction.
To do with the geometry of it at all?
No, not initially. In reviewing that case, we did realize that the length issue was going to be something that would have to be addressed either through an ordinance amendment or an exception.
Okay, so that kind of leads into, just because I don't have a lot of history with it, typically when, I mean, I'm an architect, so typically when we do projects, we provide an existing survey plan which typically shows adjacent properties and how that new construction may affect adjacent landowners. And I know that there's the DNR launch, and you have an adjacent private residence to you on
We do, east of us.
on the east side. Do you have a plan that shows how that's situated? Do you have anything that shows, adjacent landowners? Because where I'm going with this is, we're looking at trying to grant special approval for this, and there's 5 criteria here that we're being asked to address, multiple of which really address the impact on adjacent landowners, and it's very difficult for anyone to make an evaluation if you don't know what that existing condition looks like.
So we're showing the shoreline, but we do not show their homes or the.
Right, you don't show their
marina.
docks, you don't show any adjacent structures in the on land or in the water, which makes it difficult for anyone to evaluate this.
And say this configuration is really, came from our Eagle review because they were concerned about the previous configuration coming and going would encroach on our neighbors.
So I'm going to go to one of the criteria with regard to special use, and it's identified as is compatible with adjacent land uses of land factors for consideration. And one of them is, does the proposed use maintain, enhance, or diminish current navigational patterns around the site and adjacent sites relative to existing conditions? And one of the things that it mentions here as well is the Planning Commission should also consider. Now, I'm not an expert at considering traffic patterns on a lake, so that would be a very subjective decision. So on something where I can't even see what the adjacent landowners are, I couldn't make an evaluation. Plus, the fact is, I'm not an expert. You would be asking me to make a very subjective decision on navigational patterns. I'm not a boater on a lake. The only thing I can do is basically rely on what I believe to be subjective evaluations by the applicant, as well as maybe the planning department here at the Van Buren Township. And the only other information I can depend on is subjective information from lake users, frequent boaters and landowners. And at this point in time, I don't know how I could make, a judgment call yes or no without having that expert opinion. Other than that, it's just purely subjective. It's my opinion. And at this point in time, I don't know how you could ever give, any kind of consideration if we don't have an expert opinion other than just subjective input. I look further into this. I mean, you have provided a lot of information. There's no doubt about it with regard, to the geometry of this, to the use of it, which I think is very, very good information to go on. I also looked at the greater than 60%. I think that there's merit to that as well. Like I said, you provide a lot of information relative to the dock itself, but I don't think there's enough information here at this point in time to actually make a decision for the health, safety, and welfare, of the public. And that is another one of the considerations here. Item D is so designed, located, and proposed to be operated that the public health, safety, and welfare will be protected. I don't know if anybody can stand up here and guarantee that it's improved or it's maintained the current conditions. Because I know that there has been residents in the past, and I believe we even have a letter that states it's a problem. And it's like I said, I'm either going to vote with them subjectively or vote with you subjectively, but I'd rather make a decision on an expert analysis. And I think that it seems like you've been going after this for quite some time. I think if you take the time to find that person and then update these drawings to show existing conditions so that evaluation can be made, I think would be worthwhile. At this point in time, I would tell you I can't support this. I would say no. I mean, you have you're going down the field. You're at the 5-yard line, ready to score a touchdown, but you don't have the rest of the information. You're close, but if you have somebody that can stand up and speak to that, I think you'd probably make it all the way. That's where I'm at.
Okay. Anyone else? Comments with the committee?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to, just as a clarification, these were on my desk. This is from a resident, correct? This is not a plan submittal from the applicant?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there were 3 different correspondences, I believe, from Mr. Riggs today, and one of them had attachments that contained schematic drawings that he had created with different dock configurations on them. And that's what is printed separately and put on your.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure these weren't alternate proposals from the applicant. These were submitted for public comment. Okay,
That's correct. Yep.
thank you.
Other comments?
Well, I do have comments.
Please feel free, Commissioner Jar.
I am looking at the special approval criteria, and I know that for today, we're being asked to consider 2 things. We're being asked to consider a recommendation to the Board of Trustees for special approval for the marina use, right? And then in an upcoming item, we're going to have another item where we discuss whether or not the site plan meets the criteria for a site plan. And that's not a recommendation to the Township Board. That's just a Planning Commission approval process.
That's correct.
It sounds as though, Commissioner Grant, you believe that the site plan is not complete because it does not show the surrounding properties in a correct fashion?
That would be one item, yes. The other would be
Okay.
an analysis by a qualified individual or an authority that can basically make a safety assessment with regard to boating patterns and use of the lake.
Okay. I bring it up because I want to be able to separate the 2 items that we're being asked to discuss tonight, one of which is whether or not the site itself meets the criteria for a properly designed and engineered site, and whether we meet the criteria for special approval for a marina. And I think it's important for our discussion that we make sure we know that there are 2 separate issues that need to be discussed, and they can be discussed separately. I guess I will weigh in on the special use as a marina clause now. I understand very much so your desire to have a professional of some kind, boating safety expert, weigh in on it. And I think that I absolutely agree with you. That would have been great evidence to help us make a decision, either in the positive, the affirmative, or the negative. But we don't have it. It's not been provided other than, I don't have anyone with a certification in boating safety that said, yeah, this is okay. What I have is the evidence that the township has said 40 feet is okay. If it wasn't okay, it wouldn't be in the ordinance as the standard. I have evidence that says that a 60-foot dock is also okay, because although the existing conditions aren't on there, the pre-existing conditions from 2020 are on there, and the floating docks on the property go out 60 feet, and they are legal non-conforming structures. Since they're legal non-conforming structures and they're at 60 feet, they wouldn't be allowed to be up there if they were unsafe. The township would have a responsibility to, do something about that if they weren't. They wouldn't be legal non-conforming structures if they were unsafe. So a 60-foot dock is, I would argue, has a reasonable expectation of safety on the site. I don't have a professional that's come forth to say that an 85.3-foot dock is safe, but I do have, there is another body that's charged with making that assessment, and that was the Zoning Board of Appeals. And part of their criteria for determining whether or not the length of the dock could extend past 40 feet was whether or not it was, in that government body's mind, a safe structure that, and I could quote the exact statute for what the criteria were, but they felt that it did not impede on the safety and health and welfare of the public. It wasn't a unanimous vote, but it was, the body voted on it in the affirmative. And given that I don't have any other engineering or safety official, I feel like I can rely on the work that was done by that body to ascertain that the extension was not patently unsafe, if that makes sense. Barring any other information, pro or con, I have to go with what the BZA said and voted on. That said, when I'm looking at the special approval criteria, I feel that there are several of them that have been called out, A through F, promoting the use of land in a socially and economical desirable manner for those persons who will use the proposed land or activity. I agree with staff. I believe the criteria for A has been met. B is necessary for the public convenience at that location. I believe doesn't actually apply to this because they're not a utility, but staff's analysis is all right as well. Is compatible with adjacent uses of land with the factors of consideration. I think that it's next to a public boat ramp. It's next to a residence with docking facilities. I think that the club has been there for a long time. I'm not sure exactly how many years that it's been under this ownership, but I know it was Moose Lodge before then. It's been there a while. And I think it is compatible and that criteria is met. D, designed and located to be operated, that the public health, safety, and welfare will be protected. I agree with you. I think the dock is too long. But the BZA believes that this is compatible with health, safety, and welfare, and that's an opinion that I have available to me from another body. And therefore, I'm willing to say that I believe that condition is met. If it can be adequately, Part E, can be adequately served by public services and facilities, does it have electricity and sewer and drainage? You're not changing that, so the site does have the necessary electricity and sewage and drainage. F, will not cause injury to other property in the neighborhood to which it is located. Again, to the applicant, I think the dock is too long. That's my opinion. But a government body, the BZA, has met and gone over it and came to the conclusion that it was not injurious to the property. And I have to feel like I have to respect that decision and that the point has been met. Will it consider the natural environment and help conserve natural resources and energy? Well, if this was just a marina, a general use marina, I would have to say absolutely not. Marinas are, frequently known polluters. They are generally a high amount of intensive use against our natural resources. But the applicant has placed conditions on the use of a marina. This is a very constrained marina. No fueling, that's traditional in a marina to offer fueling services. That's not being offered. Pump out services, also not good for the environment in marina areas, require special attention, but is not going to be allowed in this case. No yard work, bottom scraping of toxic anti-fouling paints, not going to be allowed on the site. No dry dock work allowed on the site. It's a marina in that it has more than 6 spaces. It's also, because of the constraints that are placed upon it, it also will not be allowed to have more than 16 boats docked on the premises at one time. So it's not going to be a very large marina. It's actually very, very well scoped in terms of its size. I think 16 boats is about what you could have put on the property with the existing non-conforming structures before the unfortunate demolition began. So I believe those conditions are met for the special use. I think that the amount of detail that's gone into ensuring that this is not going to become a marina-type burden on our community, I think they've been met. The no overnight stays, addressing the concerns about unfair leasing out of the slips as a marina business. A boat can't stay there for more than 3 days at a time. There's no long-term leasing allowed. There won't be any buoys. You won't be putting any buoys further out into the no-wake zone as part of the agreement. I feel that as a special use, that the special use as a marina places good and reasonable, let's call them guideposts or constraints on the use as a marina. Forget about the length of the docks for a moment. That's site plan But for the special use itself, I feel that the criteria have been considered and met. That's my feeling on the special use. The site plan is a separate issue. But on the special use, I think I'm in favor of it. Oh, I would also add that in a previous plan, there was some lighting. When we talk about natural resources, I see that the plan's been edited to now have foot lighting.
Example, so this is, well, I understand what's going to be put on the docks at the dam.
That is.
So we use the same brand, same product, so
Yes,
our
so I
new
think-
proposal is for that
I
product.
don't think this will also cause, these type of lights don't really cause light pollution. You know, if they were raised lamp posts, as were in one of the plans, there's a potential for light leakage onto surrounding property that would have required a photometric plan. But I think that these are solar, they're low impact, they're not very bright. They do a great job of illuminating the dock for the purpose of navigation and for the purpose of people walking on it safely without causing too much glare to, you know, impede navigation. Nighttime navigation on a boat is different from a car. Boats don't have headlights. And in fact, some boats have docking lights, and it's not good when they shine them in your eyes. You can't see. Glare is a real issue on the boat, on the lake. And that these lights are a good choice and show that the applicant has been willing to you know, meet the reasonable guideposts for this special use. I'm done talking about special use. I think I am in favor of it, but I am absolutely willing to hear the other opinions of the commissioners at the table. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
I do have additional questions. There's 5 criteria for special use, correct?
There are more than 5. So for the special exception, which is what the BZA had to review, there were 5.
3, 4, 5, A through through F? G.
Yeah, there's
G.
7
1, 2,
perhaps, or
7.
8 general special
So
approval
essentially,
criteria.
those items are there for the planning commission to review and make comment on. So they've not been decided by the BZA, those comments.
Nope.
So it's like, as an example, does the proposed use maintenance enhance or diminish current navigational patterns around the site and adjacent sites relative to existing conditions? The comment here is the planning commission should also consider the ability to maneuver in the lake beyond the furthest extent of the dock. So it's asking us basically for us to evaluate whether or not we think it's safe, right? So it's, I mean, while the ZBA has approved an increase in the length of a dock, which I'm not debating, what I'm suggesting is that it's asking us to subjectively make that decision without having an expert say it's okay, or it's good, or it's bad, or it needs to be reconfigured. I'm not fighting the increase in the length. I just want to make sure that we're being asked to make an evaluation that at this point in time looks very subjective to me. And I'm saying that, you know, I'm not the expert. I don't have enough information to make that unless it's purely subjective. And then again, I can say, yours is subjective, and anyone that stands up from the audience is subjective. That's my point.
What would make that unsafe? That would be the question that I would want to know, because the navigable area at that point is 550 feet between no wake zones. You go down the lake a little farther, as Mr. Jones and I investigated it farther in the last couple of days, where it's only 390 feet. A dock sticking out 40 feet. At that point, you only have 390 navigable, no wake or wake zone area. Here, you've picked up an extra 150 feet. To me, if ours is unsafe at our position, then it should be unsafe at the other position, and we need to look at, is 40 feet too long for a dock to be placed in the lake? Maybe it should be 15 feet. If that is a criteria that we're concerned with.
Well, it's asking us to evaluate this condition, not the entire lake. That's
Right.
the thing. And again, it's a very subjective consideration. And the other thing that's missing, obviously, in order to make that evaluation, unless you go out there and walk all these sites and talk to the neighbors, you're still missing drawing information, to help evaluate that, in my opinion. And at this, I'm all for, anyone getting what they need to do to function properly. I just think that's, like I said, you're so close. It's just that you're missing those two bits of information.
Anyone else? Comments?
Not on this one.
Any others? Okay. Let's open the floor to public comment. Do we have anyone from the public that would like to comment or question?
Dan, could you throw that other drawing back that shows the
Could
docks?
you address the chair, please?
I'm sorry. Jeffrey Riggs, 29 Potter Drive, Belleville, Michigan. My lake property is Van Buren Township. So I've sent off some things to Dan, as he mentioned earlier, so I won't belabor going over all those things, but I just wanted to bring up a couple key points here that I think we might be, it might be worthy taking a look at a little more closely. One of them actually was what you're just discussing, some of the safety aspects of it. And I was reading one of the Independents earlier, and Dan Power is quoted here saying that the preliminary approval for the Taiwan company had a traffic study sent in. And he said they will still have to get the final traffic study to be reviewed by the Planning Commission. Well, is it traffic studies more important on the road for safety or for the lake? I think it's something that should be done on the lake also. And one of the things that, would it be okay if I gave this to Dan to pass around?
Or you can put it on the overhead.
Oh, okay. Let's see if we can do that. Gotcha. Okay, as brought up earlier, this is subjective. But one of the key things here that I'm showing on this, and this is kind of a muddy drawing here because it was originally set up to be a video. But if you look at going all the way to the east, you have a peninsula, and a peninsula. So what typically happens is boats come along and they go straight down here, straight down, and they don't use up all this property or this lakefront over here. This is what the typical pattern is, and that's what really ought to be looked into. And when you come from the opposite direction, you have the bridge right here, you round the corner, and they typically come and cut this corner, right or wrong, that's what they do. They cut the corner, and you have boats coming along from the opposite direction, going east to west, right down the center, so you people cutting the corner here, so now they have to duck in more closely to the shoreline. And my opinion is that going out 85 feet, which is triple the amount of normal dock space, which is, normal boat lift and dock space, is typically about 30 feet, double what the current zoning is. I think it's too much without having these safety studies done. And that's what I've taken a look at many times, just driving as a boat normally would drive and go through that particular area. So I think that needs more investigation. Secondly, over the past month and a half, I've monitored the usage of the BYC docks and snapped pictures. I posted them for BYC members to look at yesterday. And in the past, let's say 45 days or so, I've never seen the marina more than half full. It's been just sitting there. So why do we need to give away very valuable lake property to a private club that takes away 8% of the navigable waterway, 8%, which is reasonable, and to take it away when they're currently not even using the existing spaces they have? Even on Memorial Day, and these were the pictures I sent over earlier, that whole weekend, Friday, beautiful weather, there are 4 or 5 boats there. And Saturday, Sunday, 4 or 5 boats. There weren't even 6 boats there during the times that I took pictures, which were dinner time, were 6 p.m., 5 p.m., that type of thing. So I think we need to do a little more research before we give away this type of property. And because it's very valuable to the people on the lake to have good traffic flow. And whether or not people agree here, I think it sets a precedent. Because once you approve one of these, Johnny's is going to say, hey, we did it for them. We're a public entity. We can get approved. I just think it's something to be considered and an issue for us to contend with. The last thing, we do have to contend with the Denton Road Bridge issue. That is going to be shut down, not if, it is going to be shut down. And it likely will be shut down for a year, maybe more, but we don't know. It will be shut down, and when it is shut down, that means all the traffic from Sandy's Marina, all the traffic from the DNR on the next to the BYC, all of that will be on that side of the bridge. So we're looking at giving an extension to a dock that's over double what zoning is, and right at the time when we really need to have more lake available because of these upcoming situations. So that's basically my points. You heard or saw the rest in my write-up here, so I won't continue on with those. But at any rate, I just wanted to exercise my opinion here and let you know. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Other comments from the public?
Hi, my name's Steve Harsant. I live on the lake in Van Buren Township, Steve Harsant on Merrill Court. I'm also a member of the BYC. In listening to the comments, I'd ask the board to consider, a couple things that haven't been discussed yet. Is it a subjective analysis? At the end of the day, something like this, I think, is going to be a subjective analysis where it comes from an expert, if there is such an expert in this field, or just somebody's opinion. I think there's, about 350, 400 members? Tax-paying members. The club offers a benefit to the entire community. It's well approved, it's well attended. It's a thriving, tax-paying organization. It doesn't appear that the extra 20 feet is an issue, but the point I guess I'm trying to make is, for a club that size, 16 spaces is really pretty small. So the ask is minimal, not excessive, in my opinion. There are times maybe where there's 4 or 5 boats on there, and there's times probably that could have 100 or 200 boats on there, but we don't have that luxury. We're asking for minimal slips, for the membership. But the other thing that struck me odd listening to the comments here was the provision that does it maintain, or does it improve, does it maintain, or does it hurt, whatever the criteria was. It appears to me that that footprint basically maintains what's been out there, which hasn't been an issue, and it's been out there for quite some time. So that is a very subjective and very biased opinion, but it's been out there, it's worked. I don't think there's been any public issues, safety issues as a result of the current footprint. To my knowledge, there's been no issues one way or the other with the footprint. So I would say that while we may never get an expert opinion, I think we have to consider, does that maintain the current footprint, or is it excessively changing that footprint that has been highly successful? Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments?
Hi, Corey Gibson again, 43160 East Huron River Drive. I don't want to waste time echoing a lot of the comments that Riggs made that I agree with, including the Denton Road closure. That's going to put more of a burden on this side of the lake while we're trying to pass this. I'm happy to see this isn't 120 feet. Is 80 plus still a little bit unreasonable? I believe so. I do recall sitting in on the zoning meeting that I believe it was Commissioner Jar that brought up that There is a FERC requirement in the contract with Van Buren that says 75-foot limit. So where it says in the applicant's requirements here, the last one that, applicant for review by Eagle and if required by FERC, I would hope that we're not doing something to put ourselves or the entire township in violation with the FERC contract by going ahead and approving because the zoning board says it's safe by majority, barely, that we're okay to go ahead and go to 85 feet when there's a requirement in black and white apparently in the FERC contract with the township that says 75 feet. So I just want to make sure that that's also taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for a comment?
Chris Donnelly, 48356 West Huron River Drive in Van Buren Township. And I want to thank you for taking the time to consider the BYC's proposal for extending these docks. Some questions were brought up about usage of the docks, how that comes into a decision that you would be making. I have no idea. We've analyzed our docking capacity, and we've decided that having 320, 340 members, 75% of which are avid lake boaters, you can see quickly that 16 docks is not adequate on a basic day. I think he did, one of the gentlemen did submit some photos that he spent many, many days and hours cruising around the front of the BYC, taking pictures, trying to capture the amount of usage we get on our docks. Just keep in mind, that was before Memorial Day, when most boats actually go into the water, and was a time when our club was closed for the holiday. So just kind of take that with a grain of salt. As far as the safety studies, completely understood. I submit to you, as another gentleman did, that the safety studies are live safety studies. They're real life studies that are happening now and have been happening for quite some time. With the current footprint that we have of that dock, we've had absolutely no safety issues. We're merely asking to make them permanent from a temporary floating situation. If this would have caused terror and mayhem on the lake, we'd be quite aware of that by now. Again, when you travel just 800 feet to the left and past the DNR launch there, the lake narrows significantly narrower than what we're going to be doing with our docks. If people aren't dying in mass and crashing in a shoreline and are actually able to be good captains of their boats and navigate a naturally narrow area, significantly more narrow than what we're proposing, I see no reason why their captain abilities would change simply because there's a dock that is put into the lake that actually opens up further than the natural formations of the lakes. So just kind of keep that in mind as you make your decision. That my point is that I feel these studies have been done and they're ongoing. We have no safety issues at all, and we just want to make these things legal, solid, safe for all concerned. So thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
My name is Kathleen Johnson, 48035 Bayshore. I'm sorry, but it's further out than it was. It is not the same footprint. I've heard many people come up here in support of it, saying same footprint, same footprint. 20 plus feet more is 20 plus feet more. That's the entire length of a boat, a small boat. I believe that there should be a study done. I don't know who, maybe it should be done by the Van Buren Police, who police the lake, who are on the lake. They're the experts at traffic. I have also listened to the fact that, yes, the Denton Road Bridge is going to be down, and that's just going to increase the traffic over there. And I've been out on the lake on crazy days. Crazy days. And I think that, yes, 20 plus feet could make a huge difference even on a wide part of the lake. You're not talking just like on a road with cars where you can just pass each other like this at full speed. This is not a no-wakes part of the lake. It is a full wake part of the lake. You have not only the width of your boat, most of which are 8.5 to 9 foot wide now. Very few boats are only 8 foot wide anymore. Plus the area of wake. You have a lot of navigational problems, and I think they should be looked at. I'm sorry that I can't speak in favor of my club because I'm not allowed to be a member of the club because I am female. The 400 and plus members of your club, how many of them compare, what does that number compare to the number of actual residents on the lake? I'd like to see more studies done. This is for a small group. Yes, it does a lot of good things for the community. But this feels very elitist to me, and I'm not in favor of it at all.
Do we have any other comments?
Tony Vitale, 12249 Reisner Drive. I took a lot of notes during the meeting, so I'm kind of all over the place. But when I was listening, it sounded like the criteria for the special use is, does it benefit the site, the land, and the township, not causing injury to the neighbors, and conserve the environment and natural resources. I don't think I need to address the third one, conserving the environment and natural resources. I think Director Powers covered that pretty well. Does it benefit the use of the land? Does it benefit the site, land, or township? I think it does a lot. I think anything we could do to beautify the township, to create community involvement and participation, I think that benefits everybody. Looking at what used to be, and I'm going to say right now, I did just join the BYC in February. I have not been there for a summer, so I don't really know exactly what it looked like before, outside of what I saw when I drove by on the boat. But looking at what it is compared to what it was before. The floating docks, I would not feel very secure with my 3-year-old on that dock. So I think having a permanent structure does benefit the people. I think it does benefit the safety of the people using the docks. Being it's, in the same footprint or maybe a little bit over the footprint, I don't think that's causing navigable harm. It sounds like, if it is only 20 feet, and I never measured the old dock, it sounded like it's the same footprint, but if it is 20 feet larger, that's still within that no wake zone. So by going out 20 feet, it's not going to have a boat run into it because that boat should be going at a no wake speed. So I don't think, it's going to cause any additional harm. Looking for traffic studies, it's been there. That is the traffic study. If people haven't hit it before, I don't see how we think it's going to be anything different than it is right now. Does it help its neighbors or cause possible injuries? Seeing the boat launch next to it, I know watching people zipping up and down the lake as people are trying to load their boats or unload their boats. If we could push that traffic a little bit further towards the center, I think it's benefiting at least that neighbor. I think it's benefiting the boat launch where it's causing, people to go a little bit further out. And I know Supervisor Grant, Director Grant, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Commissioner Grant.
Commissioner Grant, I'm sorry. I know you were looking for the site plan with the neighbors. I just pulled up a Google map to see what it looked like. And seeing that the boat launch has their launch on the west side of the property, so the furthest adjacent spot from BYC, I think I have it measured at approximately 160 feet away from the dock. I don't see how that's going to cause harm. 160 feet is plenty of room for people to load and unload without causing injury. And looking at the residents on the other side, they do have a boathouse and a dock on their property. It is in the center of their property, approximately 140 feet away from the property line. And not only that, but their property dips further south, and it's kind of out of the line of traffic anyway. So I don't see how it could be causing any issues to hamper the neighbors. And just having the lighted docks, the stable docks, unlike the floating ones, like I said, I think that's a huge benefit to the people using it. I joined the club specifically because I have 2 young kids, and I wanted them to be more involved with other kids in the neighborhood. They have the pool facilities. We have gone up there a few times for dinner, and I've always been nervous about bringing my boat. I don't know what the docking situation was like. The few times I did go, I specifically walked to the docks and looked down to see if there were space. And each time I went, there may have been 2-3 spaces at dinner time when we went. And I thought it was ironic because some of the pictures were on the day I was there, and the pictures showed an empty dock. When I looked down there, it seemed a pretty full dock. So I'm not sure if it was just a timing issue or what, but I could take 144 pictures of Tiger Stadium's empty lots, but when they have a game, they need those spaces. So, I mean, showing pictures of an empty dock on Memorial Day when they're closed really doesn't benefit anyone. It's, are we doing something to help the people using it? And I also know one of the items was, we wanted somebody to say if it's safe. We want an expert to say if it's safe. To me, the only experts that I know of are the people who grew up on the lake, who travel the lake all the time. And for them to say, you're going out, if it's only 20 feet more, am I going to hit it or somebody going to hit it? These are the people who do it. I don't know of any experts out there that could, give you better patterns. If the BZA says it's safe and that's the governing body, I feel like we should follow their opinion. So I'm not sure why additional studies are needed. To me, it's just people trying to drag their feet on the situation, cause additional heartache or delay the process. But from my understanding, this meeting is not for the site plan. It's for special approval exceptions. And a lot of the arguments I'm hearing is, again, the site plans. So I'm just a little bit confused on that. And also, as far as safety goes, boaters need to be aware of their surroundings. I mean, I think we're all aware of that, but to say this dock is going 20 feet further, it's not a safety. Well, what if a tree goes down in the lake? Does that mean the boater is going to hit it? They need to be aware of these surroundings. There's always water hazards out there. And to say that, this is going to cause additional issues, I don't think that's anything beyond normal use of, normal expectations of what could be out in the water. There could be swimmers out there in the water. There could, children floating on rafts, a lot of things, jet skis. This, an extra 20 feet or going, more than what we have, I don't see how that's an issue. And as far as it setting a precedence, I would actually encourage Johnny's to have more dock space. I mean, I would love to be able to go up there for dinner. I haven't gone to the BYC on my boat because I'm afraid that the docks would be full, and then for me to turn around and go all the way back and then get in the car, by that time I'll just go to fast food or something. Johnny's the same thing. I think there's usually a little bit more open space at Johnny's, but if they're going to better the community, and actually at the park, for people to be able to bring their boats there and then go into the park, walk into town, I think there's a lot of areas that could actually, be improved by having more dock space. And if we want people to use the downtown area right off the lake, I need somewhere to park. And that's, the reality of it. I'm not sure how the Denton the Denton Bridge became an issue. I understand it's going to double the usage on one side, but at the same time, it's going to cut off the other half of the lake, so those people cannot come over. So it sounds like it's going to balance. I don't see how it's going to be that much additional use, but I'm all in support of this dock. I think they've done more than their due diligence on the site planning. I think they've covered everything in the special exceptions, and and as far as the environmental studies, I think the club has proven that they do so much for the community that I don't think we need to worry about this being a hazard to the environment.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair, there is one Zoom comment, and I do apologize to whoever asked this. The question was, could we show the Scott Jones pictures? I think they may have been, when the ones were put on the screen earlier, they may have been projected to to YouTube as best they could be, but we'll try to just post to the website anything that wasn't clearly viewed tonight.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions, comments? Okay.
I would like to a follow-up comment to the public comments. First of all, I think I really appreciate the fact that people come out and basically take responsibility for the areas that they live in. I think it's very helpful to hear these opinions. I want to be clear that the length of this dock isn't in question. It has been approved by the ZBA. That's not in question. What we're asked to evaluate, and one of the criteria that I keep mentioning is this, the safety of the people that use the lake. And I'm just saying that at this point in time, that it's just lacking a couple of bits of information. And like I said, they're close, but they're not quite there. And one is to complete the site plan to show the adjacent uses. I mean, in order to evaluate something, you have to see it. I can't just sit here and listen to everybody describe it to me and say, oh, okay, that's fine. I need to see it and record it. It needs to be documented. I mean, in my line of business, you have to document in plan your adjacencies and civil plans. You should do the same thing here. We have a civil plan here. Just document the adjacent sites so that we can evaluate it. The other thing is, it was mentioned by a couple of, at least one resident, I'm not quite sure who that was specifically, but the fact that, the residents, long-term residents on the lake are quite frankly the experts of, the traffic patterns. I probably don't disagree with that, but the thing is you do have opposing points of views with regard to that situation. So it's hard for us. We have to pick one. And in order to pick one, it has to be subjective because I have no documentation that supports one way or the other. I would suggest that if there's that abundance of information that's out there with regard to what I heard already, the existing condition being as it is, that it's the study, then I think that it should be up to, the yacht club to document that in an official document and present it to us. So I think if you have a document that states that it's not an issue to health, safety, and welfare, then we have something that we can talk about, especially coupled with an expanded site plan. So there's just two bits of information, in my opinion, that are still, that need to be put on the table for evaluation. Other than that, the ZBA has already approved the length.
Okay, anybody else? Here?
Through the chair. The dock that is there, what is the length of that dock? Let's get that straight because somebody said.
I think that, there's confusion between the two. So the 2020 condition of the floating docks was 60 feet. And so one of those has been removed, one of them's been partially removed. So the current permanent structure dock on the west side is 85 feet 4 inches, and that's where the 85.3 feet came from. So that's existed and what created the non-compliance.
Right.
So
That's
we
what
had
I
the
wanted to make clear,
we have
that
both
the one
conditions.
that is current is 85 feet. The BZA has granted you that, and now you want to make the other side
The
So
same.
that matches the other.
Absolutely, yes. So the west dock is 85 feet currently.
Right.
The east dock is 60 feet, but then it has poles driven past it as we were halfway through, not halfway, we were within construction when we stopped. So that's today's situation.
But this evaluation is for the entire, both sides, not just one side. That's what this is for.
Right, but the one side that is 85
Yeah,
feet.
one's already installed is what's.
Right, right. Okay.
Mr. Chair, the dock that's 85 feet was not installed under a permit or review. So the extra long one is subject to the review by Planning Commission.
Right.
As well as any replacement for
Right,
the 2020 floating structure.
Right.
Both structures are under review.
And that was put in at what time? When was that installed? In 2020, Mr. Jones?
Yeah, so it was in the fall of 2019.
All of 2019. So it has been in for 2020, 2021, and 2022.
Portion of 23, yep.
Right.
And that's why an existing site plan showing all of this information would be helpful, because we wouldn't have to ask these questions. And we could just look at it, evaluate it.
Yeah, we tried to show the 2020 condition and then where we were going. I understand.
But
We
the
don't.
2020 is not reflective of what's there. I'm saying existing, what's in place now, not what was in place in 2020.
Understand.
I have a question, Mr. Chair. For staff, either of you might be able to answer this. Someone mentioned that FERC has a requirement for 75 feet. Do you guys have any information on that? Would we fall out of compliance or
Mr. Chair.
fall into non-compliance?
Could I make just a quick
Sure.
comment, since it was a comment raised by a member of the public? In one of the BZA meetings, I did say that I had looked over the FERC license and I felt it was a 75-foot clause, but I want to clarify, I'm not a FERC licensed person, and I'm not an attorney, and I'm not the township attorney. I just had a copy of it, and I read it, and I said, gee, I'm not sure. Mostly because I want to make sure that when we're done with this process, the applicant has a smooth transition into the next licensing body. I don't want to do a lot of work to permit something that will later on be denied at a different level. This is the only reason I brought it up. And I am not capable of reviewing that license. I would hope that the township attorneys would look at it, since I believe ultimately it's the township that is responsible. Although there are contingencies that he has to conform to the FERC license. I believe it is the township's responsibility. Again, not not an attorney for the township.
I'd hate to approve something and then have it get taken back by FERC. So.
Through the chair.
Power, do you have a comment on that?
I support Commissioner Jar's statement that this needs to be reviewed thoroughly at that point in the process when it goes to FERC. I will say the reference to 75 feet that I have a copy of the license here. Again, I won't review it in detail right now, but one of the allowable uses under the FERC license would be uses that include projects that have, and this is the reference to 75 feet that I've located, at least a distance of 75 feet measured horizontally from the edge of the project reservoir at normal maximum surface elevation. So that may be, it sounds like a totally different standard, but that's the one reference I've seen to 75 feet. Of course, this will be reviewed more thoroughly when we get to that part of the process, but that particular reference to 75 feet does not pertain to length of a dock.
Okay, thank you.
So we wouldn't have to add anything specific upon approval by FERC because we already need their approval on there. So
I do recommend you still defer all of this to FERC's approval before we issue a final authorization or letter for the project. So and that's something that was written right in my report.
Mr. Chair, I have another
Yes.
question. On our agenda, we have as item number 2 is the considering site plan approval, which I assume is, since it hasn't had a preliminary site plan yet, this is still a preliminary site plan review, or is this possibly a preliminary and final that we're looking at?
This would entail preliminary and final if the planning
we so
commission
chose.
desires. Mhm.
Yeah, okay. And our current items, I mean, we've really lumped these items together. There's an item for whether or not to grant the special approval for the marina, and then there is an action item for granting the site plan or not, the site plan approval. I would like to ask the commission if, what would be the issues with moving forward with a site plan approval today? Forget about don't forget about it, but let's table the special approval for marina use for just a moment and consider just the site plan. Is there anything missing on the site plan that would be a problem?
Existing conditions.
Existing conditions, okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, when you're reviewing a project for special land use and site plan, action on the special land use must be taken before the site plan. Site plan cannot proceed without special land use.
I see. And they can't be made conditional or
No.
dually conditional. Okay, I understand why it's in that order. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, do we have any action to be taken at this time on the issue before us?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve, to consider approval for, do I have to read the whole thing? For the Belleville Yacht Club Marina special approval, where is the case number 22059? Is that enough reading more?
May I suggest that it be a recommendation to the Township Board of Trustees because the Planning Commission can only make a recommendation on a special land use.
Okay, so yeah, recommendation to the Board of Trustees.
Mr. Chair, discussion of the motion?
Yes, discuss the motion, please.
Commissioner, I think if the motion were to include a marina special approval recommendation to the Township Board of Trustees for the Belleville Yacht Club's request for a site plan review and special approval to construct a marina as defined under Section 3120B15 of the Van Buren Township Ordinance, including 2 dock structures with the length of 85.3 feet, each containing a single dock stem, with the 3 connecting docks at the location specified in the agenda item, based on the analysis and subject to the conditions found in the letter of staff dated June 7th, 2023, and the BZA approval of May 9th, 2023, noting the concerns from the Planning Commission that no buoys shall be permitted as called out on the site plan, that the concern with FERC shall be addressed by the Township Board before moving forward, noting also that this board did not consider the applicability of the FERC license. And that also with the condition as shown on the plan that no boat or part of boat shall extend past the 85.3 foot mark while docked, that the number of boats at the dock shall be no more than 16, then I would be in support of the motion for you to update it that way. Yeah, excuse me, and just to clarify that this is subject to the conditions and the analysis, based on the analysis and subject to the conditions of that were described in the letter of staff and on the site plan documenting that there will be specific uses for the marina, no fueling, no pumping, and the other use restrictions as documented in the packet tonight. Then I believe I would be in support of your motion.
Sounds good to me. Second.
I think end of discussion for me.
Any other discussion on the motion?
I'd like to say something, but it's not to add to the motion, but the fact is, I still stand that there's insufficient information to make a decision based on what's being asked of us in our documentation to justify saying yes. I still say there's 2 pieces of information missing.
Any other discussion? Could we,
Mr. Chair, This is not a discussion on the motion, but I did want to mention there was one other comment on the Zoom. If you'd like me to convey that now or after this motion, I don't know that it particularly matters.
If a motion is on the floor, you need to act on the motion
Motion
first.
first. Okay, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Dan didn't prepare me.
Sherry Budd. Brian Cullen.
Yes.
Bernard Grant.
No.
Jeff Jar. Jackson Paul.
With a vote of 5-1, the special use recommendation to move to the Board of Trustees is approved. 4 to 1. I'm sorry, 4 to 1. Okay, we move on to item number 2. The site plan. Case 22059, Belleville Yacht Club Marina Site Plan. A request by Belleville Yacht Club for the site plan review and special approval to construct a marina as defined under section 3.120B 15 of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance, including 2 dock structures with lengths of 85.3 feet, each containing a single dock stem with 3 connecting docks. The site is zoned Belleville Lakeshore District B, Belleville Lake Shoreline District B, non-single family residential BLB, and adjacent upland parcel is zoned R1C, single family residential. The project proposed is to be located in the Township Lake property adjacent to 831 East Huron River Drive, parcel ID number 8308899000500 on the north side of East Huron River Drive between Loza Lane and Evelyn Court. We have a presentation by the township staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just present before you the site plan again on the screen. I actually covered all the comments of my analysis of the site plan in my previous comments. I'm glad to answer any questions about the site plan or the contents that were submitted by the applicant.
Okay. Do we have any presentation? Mr. Jones?
I'll try to keep it short. Just wanted to share with you some of the material. Again, Scott Jones, 11696 Juniper Drive, Van Buren Township. So we're using a DOT C2, it's called, reflective tape. So it's a standard around the trucking industry, but a very good product for reflectability. So that would be the tape. We also have hard structures that we're proposing for reflective material. We talked about the lights previously, and then the surface is womanized wood. So I brought an example, and it's what's currently on the non-conforming structure that's there. But it's a 2x6 womanized product. And I have pictures if it's required, if you want to review those of the existing dock. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do we have comments from the commission?
Question for the applicant.
Go for it.
Mr. Jones, I'm sorry. Do you plan to treat that wood, or is that considered, that's fully treated, that's going to be that way?
It's pre-treated, and in the past, we haven't put any products on it because we are over water. So we remove bird droppings as primarily the only thing we do to it after it's installed.
Birds do that in the lake,
Yeah.
absolutely. The reflective material is the first time I've seen it. Forgive me, I thought I had looked at the plan, but I'm not sure where you're planning on putting that reflective tape. I
So
don't
it's
think
on the perimeter of the dock, so we can identify that, but all the surfaces that are visible by exterior property. So that's our proposal is to line the dock completely with the reflective tape.
Okay. That would be something that we'd want to see on a site plan before a final grant, correct? That would be considered signage, wouldn't it?
No, a reflective tape would not be considered as signage, not unless it's got the BYC logo on it or any lettering. As long as it's just a reflective tape, it's just a safety feature.
It's a safe.
Lettering that's on it is the DOT C2 standard.
Yes, that is not signage.
Okay, and as a comment, we do have to comment on the appearance of the dock in a site plan review, so I don't have a good vision of where these reflectors are going to go, if it's gonna look like a, forgive me, if it's gonna look like a barber pole, or how this, how, is it too much reflection? Or would a few key placed ones serve the purpose adequately, I guess is my question. Maybe it was in the packet and I missed it?
It is not in there. I did not submit location.
And on the plan, there is an address, you're planning a signage for the address of the property, right? I saw that on there next to.
Yeah,
the-
it's required is my understanding. So we have a life ring and a pole with the address of the property going. Sorry, it's here. It's written very small, but that's the location. It's centered on the existing seawall.
Thanks. Given that you have called out on the site plan the spaces for the boats, and there's no parking past the 85-foot mark, are you planning on posting the outer edge of that dock as a no docking zone? Or is there any signage planned?
Yeah, we have not proposed anything. We would discuss that obviously with our membership. And we wouldn't put cleats to moor a boat to it. We are showing the cleat locations, the dark spots for cleats.
Approximately how many of those floor lights are going on the dock? Were those called out on the?
They're showing 3 on each side currently.
Okay. And you believe that's sufficient for safe lighting of the dock in the evenings?
We've not used those, so I'm talking from a product packet,
Yeah,
basically.
sometimes
at
that's
this
what we
point.
have to go on
Yeah.
to, yeah. Okay. I have no other questions at this time.
Anybody else? Questions?
Thank you for your consideration.
I did have one that, I'm somewhat concerned of what it's gonna look like when you're standing at if I was in a boat out in the middle of the lake, what is the dock gonna look like? I mean, you're showing us that, but I don't see any elevation describing the sign, showing the signage.
Yeah, I mean, this is the current structure, so we're proposing the exact same as we currently have.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
are you referring to a standard full elevation drawing,
Yeah.
side view elevation? So there's for example, in the boardwalk project, French Landing Park that the township had reviewed previously, there's a full scaled elevation drawing. Is that something you would think would be helpful with the final submittal? For
Yeah, I
either
would
staff
like to see
review or
that.
planning commission review? Yeah.
I mean, we're concerned with appearances from the lake. We would like to see something. And the seawall, what is the seawall, the rust color steel that's normal that we see?
It is with a fence and then an aggregate behind the fence, so that was put in maybe 7 or 8 years ago.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Anybody else comments here? Comments from the public concerning the site plan?
Mr. Chair, while the present public considers making more comment, I'm just
Okay.
going to mention there is one more Zoom comment.
Would you please?
Yes, the comment is from Angela Mears, 12007 Reisner Drive. The comment is that the Lakeshore ordinance is limited to 40 feet. After several months of discussion, there was a reason that 40-foot was recommended. Have that for the record.
Thank you. Is there anybody else with comments for us? No other comments? Okay, let's move ahead then. do we want to consider approval of the site plan?
As a,
Commissioner Jar.
thank you, sir. As a technical matter, I think we do have to either approve preliminary, or we can jointly approve preliminary and final, and any motion should call out which it is.
Okay. So do we have a motion concerning the site plan?
If I could have a minute of discussion?
Sure.
I know that some of the commissioners are feeling that we're missing some site elevations. We're missing just a few more details on the site plan. As last discussion, I'm a little loath to grant the final site plan review when there are still some missing elements, or when the commissioners feel there's missing elements from the plan. I would ask staff, Director Power, do you feel that there are any elements missing from this site plan that are a concern for you at this time? I don't think any of the identified elements are things that cannot be reviewed administratively. I do think that there is sufficient detail if you were inclined to make a combined preliminary and final recommendation that we could move forward. There will be also other details provided with the Eagle permit, which of course we don't control, but hopefully there will be continuing opportunities to get a more and more complete set of details on the plans that staff can review. And there will be a final authorization at the end of the process by staff. So I think that there is enough room to gather the information we need at an administrative level if the Planning Commission was inclined to approve both preliminary and final at this point. Mr. Chair, I'd ask if any of the other commissioners have any elements that they would like to see on the site plan before granting a final, or if they feel that it's not even appropriate to move forward with a preliminary. Any?
I think we can move forward.
It's not going to change my mind to see anything more.
Well, I guess I'd like to state something. I'm still of the same opinion from the beginning. Obviously, the first part passed, but given that I still think there's a couple of pieces of information, existing conditions plan, and I know that Director Powers also mentioned that there needs to be some elevations. But I'm still in the same position as I was before, so I'm not even sure it's appropriate for me to make comment on it at this point.
Sure, it's proper. You're always welcome to make a comment, Commissioner.
I mean, I'm going to be of the same position I was for special use.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So do we have any motion or action on this item?
Mr. Chair, at this time, I move to grant preliminary and final site plan approval for the Belleville Yacht Club, for the applicant Scott Jones on behalf of Belleville Yacht Club, for the site plan review and as well as special approval to construct the marina as defined under the section called out in the action item, including the 2 dock structures with lengths of 85.3 feet as described in the agenda item this evening at the location on Township Lake property adjacent to 831 East Huron River Drive, parcel number 83088990005000, which is located on the north side of East Huron River Drive. Based on the analysis and subject to the conditions in the letter of staff, June 7th, 2023, noting additional condition that an elevation diagram shall be provided for staff review. Staff shall review the placement, a diagram showing the placement of the reflective tape. Noting, gee, I think that covers it. Is there anything that I'm consulting, anything I'm missing?
Just the reflective tape and the light fixtures that Mr. Jones showed.
Yes, noting that the placement of the reflective tape and the light fixtures are subject to staff review. And that, I believe, is my motion.
I would support that.
We have a motion by Commissioner Jar, support by Commissioner Bud. Could we have any discussion on the motion? Roll call vote, please.
Sherry Budd?
Yes.
Brian Cullen?
Yes.
Bernard Grant? No. Jeff Jar?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jones. We are now on to new business finally. I'm sorry. Item number 1. Danielle Sizemore, Group Daycare Home, Special Land Use Review. A request by Danielle Sizemore to change an existing daycare family home to a daycare group home as defined per section 2.102A60B of Van Buren Township zoning ordinance. The parcel is zoned R1A, single-family residential. Daycare group home is a special land use in the R1A single-family residential district, which requires a recommendation for special land use approval and preliminary and final site plan approval. The project is proposed to be located at 42127 Salem Court. Parcel ID number 83-10104-0071-000. And could we have the presentation by staff? Dr. Power, or Director
Yes.
Power?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Sizemore, and everybody who is still here. I know there was a lot to discuss with that last case, so I appreciate your patience. The request, as mentioned by the chair, is a request to change an existing daycare family home to a daycare group home. Under the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance, such a change requires a special land use review, and all special land uses in the township require site plan review. So the purpose of the Planning Commission meeting tonight was to solicit public comment and a public hearing, which is required under state law for special land uses, as well as to review the site plan application for this use. With residential-based uses such as this, the format of the site plan that you would typically see is generally simpler. It's generally reduced to the scope of what's required for this application. So I would ask the Planning Commission to keep that in mind when they're reviewing projects such as this. As some background broadly, there have been other similar efforts recently, partially reflective of state of Michigan policy changes that have promoted expansions of existing daycare facilities in family daycare homes throughout the state of Michigan because of a capacity issue in daycare coverage. So it's within that context, partially, that Ms. Sizemore is seeking approval for this expansion. The Michigan Zoning Enabling Act specifically identifies that group daycare homes are required to go through a special approval process by a township before they get approved. And our zoning ordinance language reflects, by and large, what's existing in the State Zoning Enabling Act regarding the approval criteria for those types of applications. So with that state of Michigan framework in mind, I would just go through the criteria of our general special approval requirements as well as our specific requirements for daycare homes under section 5.111 of the zoning ordinance. Before going into those criteria line by line, I'll just mention a few things about the home. This is a site pointed out on this map here that's zoned R1A, single-family residential district. It's an existing house that's roughly 2,800 square feet in area, in floor area, constructed in 2004. It is part of the Country Walk Phase 2 site condominium and PRD development. And it's a little bit unique in that regard because not every place where you'd have a family daycare home is in a site condo or a subdivision that has an HOA. So that's another aspect of the review. This project as well as many land uses in these types of developments, are subject to the local HOA approval. The site plan contains, there's a existing plot plan, existing plot plan of the house here to demonstrate the exact scale of the existing conditions on the site, as well as a drawn to-scale site plan that shows the proposed layout of some of the outside features of the use. I'm going to just go through the standards for granting special approval and summarize those first based on section 12.306 of the zoning ordinance. The first is that can the use promote the use of land in a socially and economically desirable manner for those persons who will use the proposed land use or activity, for those landowners and residents who are adjacent, and for the township as a whole. I note in my findings that the property is a little over 1/4 of an acre in area, located at the end of a cul-de-sac road. The base map I showed you earlier kind of shows how it is situated in that neighborhood. In this configuration, the property is relatively isolated and relatively large relative to some of the other lots in this neighborhood. And there's regular cross-traffic with the 10 surrounding neighbors on this court, but unlike with some of the other properties, there is not as much cross-traffic across the site day to day. Relative to many of the homes in this subdivision, this is an optimal layout for daycare operation in that regard. Whether the use is necessary for the public convenience and health, for the public convenience at that location, the proposed use is an expansion of existing successful daycare use that is located in one of the township's largest residential developments. There are 536 planned detached homes, most of which all but a few are constructed. And we know that daycare capacity is a widespread need in the township. So in these regards, this use can be adequately found to be necessary for the public convenience at this location. Whether the use is compatible with adjacent uses of land, due to the site's relative isolation and its unique land area, it does appear to be compatible with the adjacent uses of land. Whether it's so designed, located, and proposed to be operated that the public health, safety, and welfare will be protected. I will note that every daycare facility is subject to a rigorous inspection process by the State of Michigan License and Regulatory Affairs Agency, LARA, and so they will be checking these things as well. So I mentioned that this criterion will be met subject to adherence to certain conditions that I state further in the report, as well as to the LARA approval process. The site is adequately served by public facilities and services. Whether the use will not cause injury to other property in the neighborhood in which it is to be located. Here I mentioned that the site will adhere to the required setbacks. It's well situated with ample land available, as mentioned earlier. I do not anticipate this use causing injury to other property in the neighborhood, and I have visited the site personally. And there are adequate facilities for the educational and daycare use in the home. I do mention here that if any additional approvals are required from the Country Walk 2 Homeowners Association Management Group, that their written approval must be provided prior to the expansion. And I did have in a updated version of the packet tonight a approval letter, a general approval letter from the Century Management, which is the association management group or HOA for this area. So that has been addressed to some degree. The final general special approval criterion is that the use will consider the natural environment and help conserve natural resources and energy. There's no reason to think this use will have a detrimental impact on natural resources or energy. Now I'd like to move into the specific criteria for daycare or childcare group home uses under section 5.111 of the zoning ordinance. There are required separation distances between these uses and other uses as required under state law, and I'll go through those one by one. The first is another licensed group daycare home, which is something we mentioned looking at how the ordinance language is written for that. But the other one's adult foster care, small group home or large group home facilities. facilities offering substance abuse treatment and rehabilitation service to 7 or more people, a community correction center, residence home, or halfway house or similar facility, child care centers or adult daycare centers. And this use, there's a table that I provided in the report that shows this use is greater than 1,500 feet from all of those other uses. The second criterion is that the use has appropriate fencing for the safety of the children in the group daycare home as determined by the Planning Commission. This is an area where I would encourage the Planning Commission to discuss this in detail. There was a proposed retractable fencing specification that Ms. Sizemore provided. This is a unique situation, as I mentioned earlier, because it's in an existing HOA, and there is generally a prohibition on permanent fencing in this subdivision, except for around pools. And so the use of a retractable fence is, under current conditions, the only opportunity for fencing, given the constraints of the HOA. However, I would encourage the Planning Commission to closely review the proposed retractable fencing and request any additional information they'd like to see regarding its the way it's secured or the way it looks aesthetically. I'd certainly open that to discussion. But by and large, I recommend that the applicant provides additional graphic specifications and details for the proposed fencing, and that it's reviewed adequately by the Planning Commission for safety and aesthetic compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood. That the third criterion is that the property is consistent with the visible characteristics of the neighborhood. I believe this criterion can be met. That the fourth is that the use does not exceed 16 hours of operation during a 24-hour period. The applicant has clarified their uses will be 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Saturday, which meets this requirement. And that the fifth, and this is one that I have a fair amount of comment on, that the group daycare home operator shall provide off-street parking for his or her employees in accordance with Article 9 of the zoning ordinance in the ratio of 1 parking space for each employee. Now, there are other parking requirements in section 9.102 of our zoning ordinance that respond to the number of employees, groupings of 10 children, and the provision of stacking spaces for daycare home or daycare facilities. Some of these standards, I would ask the Planning Commission to look at potentially modifying, including the stacking spaces, and looking more closely at standards more broadly under the ITE for parking demand, because it's not likely reasonable to consider that single-family home sites that are otherwise intended for family or group daycare homes would have the 5 stacking spaces available. And based on the other standards provided, it appears to be that there would be adequate parking, less than what would be required for that combination of employees, children, and 5 stacking spaces. Under those strict guidelines, there would be required to be 4 designated parking spaces and 5 stacking spaces. I am asking for some relief from that requirement by the Planning Commission. To drill down on that point a little bit more, the applicant's site plan shows space for up to 4 vehicles in the driveway and 2 vehicles in the garage. Based on the specific dimensions of the site, however, there is officially less than 30 feet from the garage to the front lot line. So officially there would be, under the layout standards of our zoning ordinance, room for only 2 spaces side by side on the driveway and then 2 in the garage. That being said, I believe that can be reasonable. However, I do recommend that the Planning Commission require a signed agreement of some type from the nearest, and I say 6 property owners, but it may be expanded based on the desire of the Planning Commission. But I recommend some type of a signed agreement for parking that would enable the proprietor to have designated on-street parking locations that are acceptable to some of the other neighbors, as long as there's space available in that cul-de-sac for on-street parking, especially during peak drop-off and pickup times. This would be just a way to ensure that there isn't a parking capacity issue using some of the nearby available on-street parking. So I would recommend some type of assigned parking agreement be provided and ideally recorded to accommodate that need. In additional comments regarding the site plan, if the applicant anticipates the generation of garbage beyond what would be consistent with residential land use, they may have to take additional measures for waste disposal and screening, which I do not believe is the case. But also that the applicant, if they propose any signage, it must comply with any limits on signage for residential zoning under Article 11 of the zoning ordinance, and I don't believe there is any signage. The recommendation, therefore, based on these findings in my report, is that the Planning Commission may conditionally recommend approval of the requested special use and may recommend conditional approval of the preliminary and final site plan, subject to conditions in my report, which include that the applicant must clarify the number of employees in writing on the site plan, and I should have mentioned earlier, the applicant clarified there will be a ratio that's guided by the state law, which is 1 per 6 children, and there are 2 employees currently. But that's something that should be noted on the site plan. The second condition is if any additional approvals are required by Country Walk 2, that they be provided in writing. That written approval from the HOA must be provided regarding the proposed retractable fencing. That the applicant's submitted site plan should be updated and resubmitted to show only the 2 spaces on the driveway. That the Planning Commission consider a modification from the minimum required number of parking spaces under Section 9.101J of the zoning ordinance. However, also that the applicant shall obtain a signed agreement from the nearby 6 property owners on both sides of the site to agree to some on-street parking during peak hours of operation. So if the special approval is granted by the Planning Commission, it will move on to the Board of Trustees for consideration. And the Planning Commission also has the authority to grant preliminary and final site plans. So again, like the last item, there are 2 separate actions being requested by the Planning Commission tonight. I have reviewed all my findings together in one, but please take 2 separate motions for the special approval and the site plan.
Okay, thank you, Director Power. We now have presentation by the applicant,
Hello.
Ms. Sizemore.
Through the chair, is that proper?
I've granted you the floor.
It's yours.
It's yours.
May I present some paperwork to you guys?
Sure.
Okay, please. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, in
Nervous.
answer to your question before the presentation, the clock on the wall is 1 hour off. I'm sorry. He asked me a question.
I'm glad that was brought up.
I'm sorry, ma'am.
Our honorable members of the commission, staff, DBT, residents, and my lovely neighbors, well, one now. Thank you for allowing me to present to you today, but before I begin, let me first thank Director Power and his staff for assisting me in this process. Again, my name is Danielle Sizemore, and I've been a resident of Van Buren Township for going on 19 years in October. I have I've raised 3 children in the area, and I've been in the childcare field for more than 30 years, and having degrees in early childhood and social work. I've presented to you a Caring for Michigan Future. That is a document from Governor Whitmer. Governor Whitmer, as Director Power has stated, she is looking to expand over 1,000 child care centers to open. I'm gonna put my little plug in there. I'm trying to open a child care center in Van Buren Township, but to open 1,000 centers before 2024. So that is my goal. But so I did present that information to you. I am grateful to be one of these centers that Governor Whitmer has invested in. She's actually wrote an article. I gave you the first article that I was in for the state of Michigan. And I just happened to be honored to be their spotlight center for the month of May. That was awesome.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I wanted to share with you guys that it is really our responsibility to assist the parents who are trying to go to school and trying to go to work in Van Buren Township, because I am getting a enormous amount of calls for care for children. There are not enough child care centers in the state of Michigan. I'm sorry, actually in Van Buren Township and our surrounding areas being Romulus, Canton. If you make a call, they're telling you they're full. As in my current center, I'm full. I can't accept any more children. So that's the reason why the governor's office, asked me to consider, expanding. So I have the capacity to expand, so therefore I'm trying to expand. I'm sorry, my husband wrote this lovely paper for me, and I'm just kidding. I'm silly, guys, but you have to be when you work with children. But it is our responsibility to serve our youngest residents and to build a brighter future for Van Buren Township and Michigan children. With that being said, I have engaged my neighbors and have enlisted their support long before this endeavor. One of the hardest things I've always had to deal with is continuously listening to friends, families, and citizens asking me, where can they find quality childcare? In all cases, I was able to assist as some, but a lot were in panic because, once you come off maternity leave, you need some place to take your children. And there are no places right now. Now through networking with others and the state's database, the vision for caring for Michigan's children is becoming very successful and has fallen into my lap. So I come to you today asking you to grant me the ability to go from a current family center to a group home. Currently, I have 6 children in my home. I have 1 additional employee, and it's awesome. The neighborhood loves us, as you heard from my my neighbors. And I have more letters, and I'm sorry I didn't give those to you guys. But I have the support of my whole cul-de-sac. I can't put my cul-de-sac up, but I don't have the traditional. I don't have a traditional child care center in my home. I've made my child care center the type of center where the children actually feel like they're in a daycare center. Am I able to show you guys?
Oh, you want to have a picture? So, yeah.
No, I have a video. No, it
That
can.
might work. Let's try to do that there.
Okay.
I think if it works, it'll be the first time we've done it this way.
What is the coolest thing?
Gee.
This is my, wait, hold on, wait. To go to the side.
I didn't mean to jinx it when it
No,
works.
Yeah, see what you did. Okay, well. Thank you.
Very
Okay.
nice, very nice.
Thank you. And my son is a videographer if you guys ever need anyone. But So I did, so one of the things that I did want to present to you guys, I'm sorry, I should have, but this is a letter from 3 neighbors to my left and 3 neighbors to my right. May I, Chair, may I? Thank you. With their support in regards to the parking, I wanted to kind of be proactive in that regards. My neighbors, I must say, is awesome. They're awesome. They give me much support. Can we put back up the picture of my back of my home, the color picture? I'm sorry. Oh, thank you.
Collection of 5 different letters. These aren't copies of
Okay.
one.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just.
Them out.
Want to say, I am Diane Bell, and my address is 42084 Salem Court. One of those letters is probably from my daughter, Deanna Bell Dooley. And so I am Deanna Bell Dooley's mother, and I am also a widow. That's why I live with my daughter and my son-in-law and my grandkids. But I just wanted to say, since some of the neighbors already left, that in that cul-de-sac, we are a family. Most of the people have been there forever and ever, but we are a family that always have looked out for each other. When my grandkids and her kids were growing up, we all looked after each other's kids, made sure they got picked up from school. So it's not just neighbors, and with the parking may not be ideal, but we all give and take. We all support each other, so we support Danielle and the people who have to bring their kids. It's not an issue. I know you have rules and regulations about parking, but she doesn't get any flack or anything from the neighbors with the parking. We all support her. So I just wanted to say that. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
I love her. Okay. All right, and that's, I just wanted to share with you, I just wanted to show you guys one image, and so, I'm sorry. I could talk about the fence? Is that where, Chair, is that where we are? Okay.
It's your presentation. You're coming forth
Okay.
to us.
So, I am the middle house in the cul-de-sac. I'm the middle house in the cul-de-sac. So, there's, okay, let me step back.
Don't trip.
I promise I won't. Okay. I've been in the field for 31 years, in the child care field. This is my 31st. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And I wanted to say I haven't lost a child yet. Me having 6 children when I was an educator and I had a class of 26 or 31, I do know you guys know, I mean the class sizes in the Detroit Public Schools. So I was in Detroit, I was with Human Services, and I had huge classes. I've never lost. 12 children to me is nothing. I have a neighbor who lives up the street who has 11 children. I just want to let you guys know, I've raised so many children, and I haven't lost one yet. I'm currently raising this one. This is our goddaughter. She lives with us. We have guardianship of her, and children are my life. Having 12 children is nothing, and I can do 12 children with my eyes closed. But I do, we are regulated by the state. If I was to be granted the ability to have 12 children, I would have to have two assistants, which just seems like a whole lot to me. Because, 12 divided by 3, but for the safety of the children, that's no problem. The state of Michigan does not require me to have a fence. They do not. There's no way. My licensing consultant does not require me to have a fence in my backyard. It's all about supervision, and I constantly do I'm going to read what I wrote. Dan, Powers, please, Commissioner. Director Power, I'm getting it together, guys. I'm sleepy. I want to go on a boat. I done heard so much about boats. Okay. So, I just want to, and I'm going to let you guys go home. Okay, let me read what children can be very active. Although they're learning, growing, children need guidance and supervision. This is where I come into play. When children are playing outdoors, it's mostly for health and wellness, and it is our responsibility to ensure safe, enjoyable play area for all. Our best defense to ensure that our children are safe is through constant instruction and educating them on the do's and the don'ts. And that is where I come into part. A lot of parents or accidents or incidents that you hear are because the parents have not taught their children properly. I am a teacher. I am a teacher by degree. I'm a teacher by heart. And we teach our children not to go outside the boundaries of the center. If we're on a walk, they are assigned a buddy. We hold hands. I'm old school. I'm almost 60. I look both ways. I teach the children to look both ways when you cross the street. Everything. The smaller children are in buggies until we get to the playground. We don't cross the street without grown-ups because it's dangerous. We regularly enforce these messages the way you do your own household rules. My second key is that we have a designated watcher, which is myself. My employee or myself will actively keep a head count while watching our children. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with a head count. Are you? So
We call it quorum.
Okay. But it's constant. When you're working with small children, in order to keep up with them, you're constantly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you play a little while, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where's so-and-so? And, they're under the slide or whatever. It's constant. It's constant. As we build layers of protection for our children, the third key is the investment in temporary fencing if it is required. If it is required by the board, I will apply the fencing, but because my HOA does not allow me to have permanent fencing, I gave you guys a picture, and it's just like tennis netting, where the children can't break through it. They can still go around it, but we'll make sure that they don't. But they stretch all the way, they can stretch all the way from 4 feet to 8 feet, whatever you want to spend on Amazon. So I will put them on I don't want them, to be honest. But if it's required, I will put them on the sides of the homes because they're retractable. So we talk about, thank you, but they're retractable. So I will put them on each side of the home and in the back to separate my neighbor, which she would be very sad because she comes out and she sits on her lawn. This lady right here sits on her lawn and she watches. And which is really cute. I mean, she talks to the children talk to her. But I will definitely, with or without the fence, I will make sure that the children are safe. As I stated before, 12 children is actually nothing. And my yard is a nice size, it's beautiful, it's well maintained. And it's right now, I want to say if you're driving down the street and you look into the back of someone's home just driving, it looks very nice. It looks very nice. I don't know how that retractable fencing is going to look. I need a visual myself. So, but if it's required, then that's what I would do. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Comments from the commission? Commissioner Bud.
And I know through the conversations I've had with a couple of commissioners, the retractable fence, we've wondered about too. How high is it? It starts here, it comes out, it goes so far. So how much support does it have between here and there? I mean, how easy as it would be for a couple of kids to fall into it and knock it over? I mean, that was the concern with the retractable, because we've seen these retractable things that hold people that really don't much. It's just kind of a guideline. It doesn't really keep anybody from going anywhere. So, Dan, the fence mandatory by our ordinance?
It is not. There's some discretion that the planning commission has, and it is specifically that the daycare use has appropriate fencing for the safety of children in the group daycare home as determined by the planning commission. So there is some discretion that the planning commission has.
So I guess I'd like you to decide if you think that fence is safe, and what is it gonna look like? I mean, you're open 6 days a week.
Yes.
So I don't think it's something you're gonna go in and retract it up at night. I mean, I don't know what you're gonna do with it.
I would retract it every day. So it's implanted into the ground. So it's all the way in my grass and I on the picture. So once we're done with the day, we're finished with the day, I would retract it every day. And my wind from my backyard, I would have to retract it every day. So it's made of the same material as a tennis, I don't know what it's called.
The net, the nylon net.
So wherever the
tennis
post
net.
was, if you say your backyard was 100 feet, it's gonna stretch 100 feet. So there is no support post anywhere else except from this point to that point.
I would have more than one. I would have multiple.
Right. But it only goes from here to here.
I actually looked it up on my cell phone to see exactly what it is. I believe the fence length is only 25 feet. So for every 25
By
feet.
feet, she's gotta have 2 of these things.
Yeah, she will have. And I think these are similar to when you have kids sitting in the back seat of the car, you have the retractable window screen, so the sun doesn't fall on them, you retract it, it goes back in. So it's going to pretty much look like that. It's going to serve more as a visual barrier. They're talking about little toddlers, so toddlers go up to it. I don't think the fence is intended to actually hold their weight like it would an adult, but it's basically kids would know the ball stops over there, so they stop. So I think Ms. Sizemore will be retracting it, so you will have like little
Posts,
just the-
periodic.
Yeah, just the posts will be there periodically, but based upon the manufacturer specs, it's 25 feet long. I think for a visual deterrent for little ones, it'll work.
What age group do you take?
From 6 weeks to 12 years.
To 12 years.
Correct.
Okay, now I gotta ask the same question that the gentleman asked. I'm sure there is an escape window in your basement.
Absolutely. It is
I knew there
required.
was.
It's actually required by the state.
Right.
That is one of the requirements of the state before I was issued my license. So not only is it 2 egress windows, but it's also we have escape stairs in one room. Yes.
The gentleman's name was Mr. Corey Gibson.
Okay, so we'll be happy if he calls us, we could tell him, yes, it's an escape window and she's got a ladder.
2. 2.
These, I have these on my desk tonight. Where'd they come from? What are they?
Just passed
Oh, you
I'm
just
sorry.
passed these
Yes.
out?
Yes.
So
Yes.
this is the barrier that shows the kids not going across a driveway. So it's
Correct.
intended as sort of a driveway ball stop barrier.
Correct.
And this is the model, this 25-foot adjustable one is the model that we're talking about on the site plan.
Ones that I'm considering.
Get one for my puppy.
But it's not necessarily required. It's at our discretion. And I would agree that I think it would make sense to leave it up to you as to whether or not you needed it for safety purposes.
Okay, thank you.
It would be ineffective if you were to leave the kids unattended, but based on what Ms. Sizemore is saying, the kids are never going to be outside without at least one person keeping an eye on them. So if you're going to keep it as a permanent fence, of course, it's not going to work. But I think for the purposes of this daycare that's proposed, it should
She
be.
can have the neighbor doing her counting too.
Thank you.
Any other questions
Mr. Chair, this is
or comments, I should say?
first, we're talking about the special land use recommendation to the Board of
Yes.
Trustees, followed by presumably a preliminary site plan approval, or preliminary and final if we decide to, correct?
Correct.
Right. 2 separate.
Got it.
And we gotta do the special land use first.
Yes, sir.
We got that.
Are we at that
Okay.
time? Well,
Well, we got public comment.
okay, we're not at that time.
Almost. Almost.
Ms. Sizemore, see, it happens to me too.
I'm not alone.
Is there anyone in the public that would like to make any comments concerning this?
Nobody on Zoom with any new comments on this.
Please.
Somebody in person.
Come forward, give us your name, please. And address.
Okay, my name is Alma Hughes Grubbs, and my address is 47755 Bentley Drive, Van Buren Township. And I've known the Sizemore family for several years. As a matter of fact, I moved out here before they did. And I've known them to both, her and her husband, both to be very outstanding people. I know she's worked in childcare forever, and she's been very effective, and she has a love for children and helping. And I think this is a great opportunity for our community instead of her being drawn in another direction, because I'm sure there's other communities that would be welcoming to have a daycare service that would, you know, benefit the people that live in the community. So hopefully she'll get what her heart desires. And she's just such an outstanding person and very committed. And I'm very proud of her.
Especially when you look at that basement. My goodness.
And believe it or not, she did all that herself. All the graphics, all the colors, just she put all of that together.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
I apologize. Through the chair, I'm Rodney Sizemore. I'm her husband, and I just want to tell you, if approved, this would be great. I've been in law enforcement for 27 years for the Detroit Police Department. I also sit as the vice president of my union, in which I represent 650 supervisors of the Detroit Police Department. I also sit on some national boards. One of the biggest things that we go through is, for my members and for officers, is childcare. Not only do I go through that for my members, but I go through it through people that I meet, people trying to get jobs. I have relationships with, members of the UAW, the IBEW, which is our electrical workers, our plumbers union, and we all go through the same thing. Even our neighbors, finding quality, affordable child care, somebody that you can rely on, somebody that you can trust. I'm gonna tell you, I was trying to push her at first, hey, let's do something, in the city of Detroit for my members. And then the more I thought about it, I said, no, why don't we do something? Because guess what? We got a lot of officers that live in Van Buren Township. Just as Alma just said, I have probably 40 members that live in Van Buren Township that also need childcare here. And she gets calls every single day from people that live right within our community that are aware, because guess what? It's like this network of childcare centers, and they're calling each other, hey, do you got any space? No, I don't have any space. The state got this database or whatever where people call, and they're constantly trying to figure out who has space. No one has space for the people that live here. So that's why we said, about a year ago, hey, what do you think about doing it at home? Or whatever, to start out, and maybe we can, move it and expand it. And then the program came, from Governor Whitman's office to expand childcare centers throughout the state of Michigan. And we've been here for 18 years. My sister's been here for 44 years. My mom's been here for a number of years. Alma's been here, for a number of years. And we're all a family right here. Like everybody in that whole Country Walk 2 subdivision, whatever, we all know each other's names. It's kind of crazy where you got neighbors that know each other. No one's Airbnb in their home out. We know the needs of the community right where we live. And I'm just asking you to allow this variance for her to be able to move on to make it better for the residents of Van Buren Township, so we can provide some affordable child care and some child care, just for our neighbors. That's all. Thank you.
Welcome, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, do we have action?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Jarr.
I want to add that I grew up on a court. I'm not a child anymore, but I can still name all of my neighbors in that neighborhood that I left when I was in elementary school. I know what it's like to have the neighbors come out in support of a project. And I know what parking's like on one of those courts. And to have the neighbors still come out and in favor of it says a lot to me. I believe that your video is very, looks good down in that basement.
Thank
Looks
you.
like a very well-run daycare, which is why at this time, I would move to recommend to the Township Board that they grant special use for a group daycare home as defined in Section 2.102A 60B and is regulated by state law, located at 42127 Salem Court, based on the analysis and subject to the conditions in the letter of staff of June 7th, 2023, noting that the PC approves the modification of the parking standards as recommended in the staff's letter, and that the fencing without additional fencing is found to be acceptable. However, if you want to put in the retractable fencing and it's okay with your HOA, you may do so at your discretion.
Thank you.
Humbly submitted for your support.
I will support that, but we have to mention the parking?
I believe, Director Power, you made a recommendation about the parking, and
Or do we do that with the
Site
plan?
plan.
With the site plan, if you prefer.
Okay, sorry about that. I'll support your motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Jar, supported by Commissioner Bud. Any discussion on the motion? Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Sherry Budd,
Yes.
Brian Cullen,
Yes.
Bernard Grant,
Yes.
Jeff Jar,
yes.
Jackson Paul.
Yes.
Yay.
Not done yet.
Okay, oh God.
You have gotten the first step.
Hold on.
You still have 2 steps left, one more with us and then the Township Board. Okay, item number 2. Danielle Sizemore, Group Daycare Home, preliminary and final site plan review. A request by Danielle Sizemore to change an existing daycare family home to a daycare group home as defined in section 2.102A 60B of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance. The parcel is zoned R1A Single Family Residential Daycare. Group home is a special land use in R1A Single Family Residential District, which requires a recommendation for special land use approval and preliminary and final site plan approval. The project is proposed to be located at 42127 Salem Court, parcel ID number 83101040071 000. The property is located on Salem Court between Camden Road and Milton Drive. Presentation by the township staff.
Mr. Chair, my presentation is complete.
Thank you. Did you have anything additional to add, Mrs. Sizemore?
No.
To your presentation. Do we have any discussion?
No.
Mr. Chair, I have one question. Is it sufficient in the motion to simply note that the PC approves the modification of the parking standards as recommended in the staff letter of June 7th?
Yes, that would be adequate.
That's the only point I wanted to ask, sir.
Okay, do we have any other discussion within them? Okay, do we have any comments from the public?
We have no comments in Zoom.
Okay, carrying forth, do we have any movement within the item by the commission?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Jar.
I move to grant the preliminary and final site plan approval for a group daycare home as defined in section 2.102A 60.b and regulated by state law, located at 42127 Salem Court. Subject to the conditions in the letter of staff dated June 7th, 2023, noting that the PC approves modification of the parking standards as recommended in staff's letter. Also noting the previous acceptance of the fencing on the site plan.
Support.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Jar, support by Commissioner Grant. Could we have a roll call, a discussion on the motion? Roll call vote, please.
Sherry Budd?
Yes.
Brian Cullen?
Yes.
Bernard Grant?
Yes.
Jeff Jar? Jackson Paul? Done.
Got it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys. If you have any grandchildren, children, send them on over. I have 6 more spaces pretty soon.
It is very refreshing to see a project where the neighbors are so much in support of you. It shows just how well you run your business, because that's not something we see very often here. So kudos to you for that.
Thanks, guys. Am I good? Okay, you guys have a good night.
You better get the little one home.
Yeah, poor thing.
She has been excellent sitting there all that time.
How long?
Oh, 2.
Oh, we got 2. You want to take a?
Would you mind if we took a 5-minute break? I think we need to stand up. I propose for a recess for 5 to 7 minutes.
Meeting to re-adjourn
Re-adjourn.
at 8:30?
8:30.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I don't know if I can get up.
I was thinking the
I've
same.
been sitting in a chair since 8 o'clock this morning.
I know, and I had to slice and dice them.
I know, I saw some. I totally saw it. It had to go in that order too.
You have pins and needles because
Oh, yes, do you need any of your? Do you need any of your
Thank you,
materials
guys.
back, or you?
No,
set?
thank you guys
I'll
so
be,
much.
I'll be
You are welcome.
scheduling for the Board of Trustees meeting. Well, I think you've supplied all the information we need you to supply. As long as I have a copy of what you turned in tonight, I'll include that in the
Job
board
staying
packet,
awake
too.
the whole time.
She probably listened better than most people.
Yes.
You were such a good girl. How sweetly she sat the whole time. No, I'm not. I'm the planning consultant. Yes, I know all the procedures and rules, though.
She's in more meetings than we are.
She was so good. I mean,
Yes.
to sit patiently for all that time.
I bribed her. I told her she could go to Walmart.
Whatever works. I'm raising little kids. You want to watch Elmo for the 4th time? Yeah. Just keep quiet. Don't shout.
And the clock is off by an hour, so it isn't
Yeah,
really
9:30.
9:30.
I looked up there and I'm going,
That was freaking me out. That's why I started keeping track. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, how'd it get to be 9:30?
yeah, I was up there, I was looking at it, it was 8 o'clock. We took recess when you got up.
That's how I grew up. Floating. You probably came in hot from your Lansing drive too, right? Well, you know, I ran out of the house. I can't believe it takes me 25 minutes to get
Down Belleville Road?
down Belleville Road these days. And then I realized as I was halfway there that I forgot all my notes. You know, when I write the motions, I'm pre-write, right? So I just can't read them. It's time.
You're welcome.
I'm getting a lot better at doing them on the fly, though.
I picked the worst one.
Pick the best. Pick the best. You did great.
I need to make some practice
Oh.
ones. Run through and
Run through that shit.
I know.
Yeah, that one's really good. That is really good. If you don't have it, I'll email it to you.
No, I've got it right here. I put it away because it had too much clutter.
It is.
Just give it a little warning tap and everybody will.
I hate doing
Just
that.
a little light one.
Do you get that at the beginning too?
What's that?
You have to use that at the beginning. Does it only straighten people out? Their attention?
Yeah, I was ready to start throwing that thing.
It's an attention-getting device.
Between some of the speeches.
Excuse me.
3 minutes max.
I didn't know if we had a time limit or not.
You should, yes, always 3. If it's few people, 5 minutes you can give, otherwise only 3. Otherwise, the gentleman was presenting a thesis over here.
Oh, yes,
You can cut them off, it's perfectly valid.
yes. Yeah.
All right.
We hope. You too. Okay, at this time, I'd like to call the meeting back to order. And we have before us item number 3, Robert Sloan, Van Born property, rezoning request. A request by Mark Drain on behalf of owner Robert Sloan to rezone the parcel described as parcel ID number V12583009990002000 from M1 Light Industrial to M2 General Industrial. The parcel is 24.48 acres in area. It is located on the north side of Van Born Road, east of Sheldon Road. We will first have a presentation by the township staff and consultant. Commissioner
Chair.
Jarrett.
Just as a point of the agenda, we did have public hearings for several rezoning requests, but they aren't all on the action item agenda this evening. That's
Right.
intentional.
It's intentional.
That is intentional.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
I think staff envisioned that we may be here at this hour, so we worked with one of the applicants to get a deferral to
Talk
the
was
next
there.
meeting.
The power?
I'm sorry. I defer all my comments to the principal planner, Vidya Krishnan.
Thank you, Director Power, members of the commission. As Chair summarized, the request before you tonight is from Mr. Drain to rezone a 24.4-acre parcel that's on the north side of Van Born Road from M1 Light Industrial to M2 General Industrial District. The site is currently a vacant, undeveloped parcel of land and is zoned M1. To the north is the railroad, to the south is vacant, undeveloped land, as is to the east, and to the west is what the Planning Commission recently approved, a preliminary site plan for TYC Genera. In terms of the future land use plan, the entire area, the parcel to the north, east, west, and south are all planned for either light or heavy industrial uses. The zoning ordinance has specific standards based upon which every request for rezoning is reviewed, and I will summarize those in brief. The first being if the request for rezoning is consistent with the master plan's goals and objectives. Now, per the master plan, the future land use for this parcel is heavy industrial, which is basically intended for industrial uses of a higher intensity or for areas that take advantage of being next to a railroad or that are abutting a major thoroughfare and are generally buffered by light industrial uses. The uses most appropriate for this district are sites where raw and semi-finished materials are fabricated, manufactured, and warehoused. As I previously mentioned, it is located right next to another manufacturing and research facility that was just approved, that is also zoned M2, and it also abuts the railroad to the north. So at this time, it does comply with what the master plan's intent for the parcel is and the goals and objectives for the area. Is the proposal consistent with the basic intent and purpose of the zoning ordinance? So the zoning ordinance does have specific setback, greenbelt, parking, and other site design requirements depending upon which district the parcel is located in. As such, when this parcel is developed as an M2 use, those standards from the zoning ordinance will be applicable to whatever use this parcel is intended for. At this point of time, the applicant is just requesting a rezoning, and there is no concept plan associated with it showing what type of M2 use will go into the parcel. Third criteria is the capability of the street system to safely and efficiently accommodate expected traffic generated by the proposed use. As I mentioned, since we don't know the use, we don't know exactly what kind of traffic will be generated. However, since it is going to be a manufacturing type of facility or a general industrial facility, it is likely that there will be significant truck or vehicular traffic. At such time, when the parcel is developed, a detailed traffic impact study will be required, and any necessary road improvements to Van Bond Road or the close-by intersections will be required in conjunction with any Wayne County review of the proposal. Are the capacity of the township's utilities sufficient to serve or accommodate the use? At this time, since there's no building, we are not aware of any pressing need for utilities at this time. At a future date, when a proposal comes up for this parcel, it will be reviewed by the township engineer for connection to utilities and to see if the stormwater detention needs of the site are handled. The next criteria is the rezoning being proposed in order to correct an error in the zoning ordinance, and there is no such problem at this time. As the township is aware, the Planning Commission has recently received numerous requests for industrial-based uses. There is definitely a growing market for manufacturing, research, and technology-based uses, not just in Van Buren Township, also other communities where larger land acreage is available for such uses. The proposed rezoning is not going to result in exclusionary zoning, which basically means we are not changing the zoning on the parcel in order to purposely exclude a lawful land use. So the rezoning is not going to result in any such action. If the rezoning is requested, is it compatible with the site's physical, geological, hydrological, or other environmental features that are on the site? Now, the site does not contain any regulated wetlands, as we could see on the FEMA website, but it does contain vegetation. It has got significant wooded areas in it, and there are some wetland soils around its edges. Also of note is the Yost Drain, which runs along the northern edge of the parcel and sort of cuts through the parcel at about 1/3 of its width. The drain then continues across Van Bon into the southern parcels. So any future development of this site will have to account for the actual location of the drain on this property. Whether the drain needs to be relocated or built around, that will be done in coordination with Wayne County. That is entirely Wayne County's jurisdiction. So at this point of time, the applicant did submit a cover letter that states, I quote, permitted uses are compatible with the state's physical, geological, hydrological, and environmental features. So approval of the rezoning is not a tacit approval of the buildability of the parcel. That is up to the applicant at a future date to determine how development can be accommodated on the parcel based upon its natural limitations or restrictions. There are a whole host of uses that are permitted in the M1 and M2 district that are summarized in the review letter for you. If the rezoning is requested, will this be in reasonable relationship to the surrounding zoning districts, and will it be able to meet all the dimensional requirements? Now, this is a significantly large parcel. It's 24 acres. So as such, any development on this parcel should be able to meet whatever setback requirements are there for the district. And like I mentioned, at such time when this parcel is developed, we will review it in detail in order to make sure that it does comply with all of the requirements for the M2 district. If rezoned based on the master plan and the fact that it is adjacent to another M2 zoned parcel, it is going to create a contiguous zoning district for heavy industrial and is not resulting in a spot zoned parcel. Further, the rezoning of this parcel is being done not specifically to permit a specific type of use. It is being rezoned because it's in compliance with the master plan. It is ideal to rezone a parcel to comply with the master plan rather than change the underlying M1 district to permit heavy industrial uses, which we do not want to do. If the rezoning is approved, it is not going to create an isolated or an incompatible zoning district in the middle. So we are not exactly creating an M2 parcel in the middle of a residential or ag or other commercially zoned parcels or similar incompatible districts. At this time, based upon a review of the proposal, it is our recommendation that the Planning Commission recommend to the Township Board of Trustees rezoning of the subject site from M1 to M2 zoning designation based on the findings of fact that the requested rezoning meets the standards of section 12.504A through F of the zoning ordinance. And we also want to note that the recommendation is in no way an approval of the buildability of the parcel. That is something the applicant will have to investigate at a later date when they have a proposal for actual construction on the site. I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Do we have anything else from staff?
No, I have nothing to add.
Okay, do we have the applicant here?
Good evening. My name is Mark Drain. I'm with Rogvoy Architects. My address is 20700 Civic Center Drive, Suite 170, Southfield, Michigan. And I'm representing Robert Sloan tonight. And I say this sincerely. I love coming to a McKenna community because everything is well thought out before I get here. So,
Thank you.
Presentation to make. Wow, was that a nice compliment for a change?
I've been doing this so long. Phil McKenna used to be sitting there when at some time. So, but anyway, I'm here to answer any questions.
Commissioners, do we have any questions?
I have no questions. I do agree with the consultant's findings.
Excuse me. I do have some questions, but I don't know if it really impacts the decision. Does a site like this, has it had a wetland survey completed?
No, a wetland survey will be done at a later date when the applicant chooses to. I just looked at preliminary FEMA and Eagle maps, which did not really show any regulated wetlands on the site.
So to be clear then, a monumental tree, or just a tree survey and a wetland survey will be required for the development?
Yes.
Perfect, okay.
Understood.
Good.
Is that it?
That's it?
Any other commissioners, questions? Okay. Thank you. And public comment. Do we have anyone from the public?
Nope.
Mr. Chair, there's nobody on Zoom.
Okay. Any further discussion by the commission? Then do we have an action?
Mr. Chair, I move to recommend to the Van Buren Township Board of Trustees that they grant the rezoning quest from M1 Light Industrial to M2 General Industrial at the site located on the north side of Van Born Road, east of Sheldon Road, also known as parcel ID V125-83-009-99-0002-000, based on the analysis and finding of fact and subject to the conditions in the McKenna letter dated June 7th, 2023, making note that this this recommendation is not an endorsement of buildability on the parcel. It's humbly submitted for your consideration.
Support.
We have a motion by Commissioner Jar, supported by Commissioner Grant. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Sherry Budd?
Yes.
Brian Cullen?
Yes.
Bernard Grant?
Yes.
Jeff Jar?
Yes.
Jackson Paul?
You're welcome. You have, yes. And now to item number 4. 23026, Subaru Research and Development Incorporated, landscaping modification. Applicant Subaru Research and Development Incorporated seeks modification from section 10.105C of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance to allow approximately 1.1 acres of original landscaping plan for the Subaru Research and Development Project, excuse me, case 18-021, located at 50255 Michigan Ave, tax ID, parcel 83998019802. 027 to be converted from turf grass to native plantings that will use little or no irrigation. The Planning Commission may grant modifications to a landscaping plan under section 10.106 of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance. Could we have a presentation by staff, please? Director Power?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you for the introduction, and thank you, Mr. Plum, for your patience tonight. We have Ryan Plum from Subaru here to present the project. I do recall now that there's additional imagery that I'll put up on the screen while I describe this. But again, the site, as mentioned by the Planning Commission Chair, is the Subaru Research and Development Site, formerly known as Project Pancake, which was approved by the Planning Commission in 2018, case 18021. For the Planning Commission's reference, I have the existing aerial and the couple of excerpts from the initial landscaping plan that was approved for the project that's included in your packet that shows a kind of a winding landscaping plan with trees and shrubs according to the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance. The applicant has made clear that Subaru is interested in pursuing an alternative landscape design for the front section of the property, citing significant savings in potential irrigation and the introduction of some native planting species with benefits for pollinator species and other benefits that are introduced by the introduction of native plants and this type of landscaping design. The applicant has provided a letter dated June 7th, 2023 from Subaru, as well as a letter from PlantWise dated January 16th, 2023 that explains the proposed landscaping plan in detail, as well as I'll put it on the screen briefly, more of a schematic planting design proposed by PlantWise that matches, and this is a zoomed in version of it, but it matches the detailed prescriptive planting statements in the PlantWise letter from January 16th. The applicant has also provided some sample images of comparable project designs in other locations to show the kind of design aesthetic that they would be seeking here and the type of plantings they'd be seeking here. And here are those example images. Section 10.105C of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance requires that all landscape areas are irrigated. And typically these areas are, apart from the required ornamental and evergreen and shade trees and shrubs, landscaped areas are primarily covered with a ground cover or lawn. In this case, though, the applicant seeks a less water-intensive landscaping design that would phase out some irrigation over time. So for that reason, because it's a modification to the original approved landscaping plan, the applicant is seeking approval from the Planning Commission, which is under the authority of 10.106 of the Township zoning ordinance. I'll defer any further description of the project to the applicant. In staff's review of the project, the applicant has provided a very detailed description of the project, and staff can support conditional recommendation for approval by the Planning Commission on the following recommended conditions. The first is that a detailed, updated version of the landscaping plan for the Subaru project must be provided by the applicant. So in addition to the more schematic drawing, just an update to those L sheets from the original landscaping design set that show any shrubs or trees that are removed as part of this design would be replaced or kept or maintained. The second recommended condition is that 2 years following the initial installation, the site will be re-inspected by township staff. If there are no maintenance concerns at 2 years following the installation, staff will administratively approve the continuation of the landscaping plan. However, at the planning director's discretion, the landscape plan may be referred back to the Planning Commission for additional periodic review. And finally, that the staff will hold any remaining landscaping bonds from the initial project construction until the completion of this new planting installation. With that, I would be glad to answer any questions. And we also have the applicant here to further describe their project.
Thank you all. I know it's been a long night, and boy, that daycare thing got me going a little bit. Yeah, so this is our project we want to do. You know,
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry.
Excuse me. Introduce yourself for us, please.
Sorry, my name is Ryan Plum. It's been a long night. I'm the facility manager at Subaru Research and Development, located at 50255 Michigan Avenue, Van Buren, Charter Township, Michigan. So how this came about, every year we have to submit projects or plans to our corporate board. What are we doing to become better stewards of the earth, corporate social responsibility, reduce energy use, et cetera, et cetera. We very carefully monitor what we throw away. We recycle as much as we can. We compost. We're pretty small. What else can we do? We're looking at doing solar, different kinds of on-site green energy, and then we started looking at our land. What can we do with it? Looking at our water bills. We use, on the days that we don't irrigate, 300 to 400 gallons of water a day. We irrigate about 3.6 acres total. The land that we are proposing for this is about 63 to 64% of that irrigated land that eventually we would hope to convert to native species, durable things that require less irrigation, don't require pesticides. So this area that we're talking about, every time we run our irrigation, it's 2,000 gallons of water. So that's a pretty significant amount of water that we can save by going to something like this. We've chosen areas to look at this that are currently irrigated. So that means once this is planted, it's going to be a phasing out of that, but we have the irrigation in place there already to help this grow and get going. This isn't something that happens overnight, but we've also budgeted extra money to insert plugs and transplants of things so that it doesn't just look like a field of weeds right away. So that's how this came about. Like I said, mostly looking at how we can use fewer resources and just become. We're making cars, so what can we do to be less terrible than making cars and paving the planet? And we've got this big field out front, and right now all we do is throw water into it and pesticides, and people drive by and throw trash in it, and we pick it up once a week. What can we make something useful out of this? We're a very traditional Japanese company, so I'm under a lot of pressure. I know aesthetics are a big deal here. Trust me, what I'm getting internally and the pressure I have to, we get visitors and vendors that come in. This has got to look nice. So I understand the concerns, but this is something we hope to be proud of. Putting signs out when visitors come, hey, here's what we're doing. This is what our other facilities around the United States are doing. We have a 0 landfill plant in Lafayette, Indiana. Literally nothing gets thrown away. They've got a nature preserve on site. A lot of our dealerships are going to this. Our corporate sales office in New Jersey has done these. So we're just, we're trying to do our part. We're small. We can't do too many things, but, this is something we can do. So, we're working with a great local company, PlantWise. We've shown examples of some of their other work. The Washtenaw County, the Ann Arbor Water Treatment Plant, Huron Hills Golf Course, and a few other businesses. That's it in a nutshell. It's been a long night. I'm not going to talk any more than necessary. I'll try to answer any questions I can, but we want to try to do something good, and that's what we're looking to do.
Do we have any questions from
Commissioners?
commissioners? Yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
How many landscaping bonds are remaining currently?
I don't know if it's a $1,000 or $2,000 landscaping bond that's left on the project. I think we discussed being held until this is completed.
We have no problems with that at all. Like I said, any internal pressure and nitpicking I'm getting is pretty. This is pretty adventurous for us. So, but that's fine. That's not an issue on our behalf. Hold us to the standard because I got to drive by this every day and come in and deal with comments from my general managers and stuff. So I'm going to be pretty, working pretty hard with these guys to make sure this looks good. And, we do whatever we can to, make it look like something cool, something to be proud of, and maybe something you can reference people or put in your township magazine, like, hey, look what they're doing and spending their money on. And so.
Okay.
Yes, I actually got comments and some questions. Actually, I agree with you. I like the direction that you're taking with naturalizing and use less water. But I do have some questions with regard to the existing site. How complete is that landscape site? Because I'm not as familiar, maybe as some of the other commissioners, with that.
With what we have currently there?
Yeah, is it completed?
We have, we have grass established out front. We have probably a dozen or so trees. We have some shrubs lining the parking lot, which we've been struggling with and replacing. They're just not durable. When you put salt down to make your parking lot accessible,
No need to explain that one.
so that's part of what we're looking at this, is to pull out those things that are not thriving and replace them with more durable, hardy native plants.
So at this point in time, obviously, is there a design, other than, I know that graphic that you had showed us, is there a design that we should take a look at and review as part of this? And then I have a question, because I've been involved in things like this before. Because there is a concern for, I know you're looking at naturalizing and maybe looking at tolerant and sun tolerant planting, so that they do grow and they're not just burning out in the summertime without being watered. But I also know that rain gardens are another good way to naturalize areas, and I'm not sure this area is graded that way, or if you're planning on maybe thinking about that and grading it for that type of application, because then you can collect water. But I don't know, I don't know where this whole thing stands right now.
Pollinator gardens are a good idea because they can be maintained, they can be mowed. Rain gardens, on the other hand, unless they are maintained immaculately, will end up becoming mosquito pits. I have seen rain gardens built that, unless they are meticulously preserved, we have not had much success in the couple of projects. They have put rain gardens in, they had to fix it later. So I think having a pollinator garden with the conditions that Director Power has suggested might give the Planning Commission comfort to ensure that it's done properly. If it's not done properly, you're going back to whatever the landscape plan originally was. So.
Do you have to occasionally water that type of thing, or is it totally self-sufficient?
The goal is that eventually it would be, but we have all the infrastructure in place. If our consultant comes by and said, hey, we've got a really bad stretch coming up and this isn't, we have that ability. We don't plan to take out any of the irrigation. But at the very least, we're going to stop putting fertilizer and pesticides and stuff on that area. But we do plan to keep all of the existing irrigation infrastructure there. I don't have a drawing. I have a description of what this is going. I don't think PlantWise has a architectural landscape artist on staff. That's something I can definitely ask them for. I'm not trying to hide anything, so if that's what I need to get, that's what I need to get. But, they try to describe anything we can save there that's there, we're going to save. But, yeah, obviously the stuff that's not doing well, we're going to pull out. And, again, everything will be very carefully selected that can grow there based on the conditions. And
so if you have a dry spell, then you do have the ability to turn on the irrigation system just so you tide it over. Say you don't have rain in spring for weeks on end, and it's not going to become a weedy patch, right? You're going to turn on the irrigation as necessary to make sure that it survives.
yes, just because of the volume of water that our irrigation runs, we have separately controllable zones, and we keep a pretty close eye on that, and we change the programming every week based on if we're getting rain or not. So that's something we already watch really closely. So
as you said,
sorry, just to follow up on the weedy. So part of our proposal with PlantWise going out 2 to 3 years is also for several times a year for them to go through and pull out anything weeding that is not that we didn't want in there, or if invasives get in there, to deal with that. So that is part of their proposal that we're paying for.
Going to be a yearly maintenance program. I mean, it seems like you almost have to do that continuously. As long as
Yeah,
you're on the site,
I
right?
think once the natives take hold, it will obviously require, maintenance, but yeah, it's not just annually. I think it's 2 to 3 times a year in their process. We go through there, and they feed out, they pull out what's not supposed to be there, treat the areas that aren't coming in, and then reassess what needs to be seeded more.
Commissioner Jarr.
So there are some bushes that are planning on being removed?
Some of the shrubs, I know that was a concern, like if you're replacing.
Are any of them required for screening, like for headlights pointing at the road, anything like that? I'm just worried about, the safety screening.
Not specifically for screening. There's a ratio of trees that are required based on the parking areas, but not shrubs.
Right, okay, so it's, as far as we know, it's not required screening for, okay.
Yeah, this area that it primarily affects right here.
Okay.
It's just visitor parking. Any of the nighttime testing that we would be doing is in the south side of the building, which is
Behind the berm.
berms and fenced. Yeah.
We
So
know all about the berm.
Yep. Oh,
Was required strictly for ornamental planting and
Ornamental planting.
accentuating the building, not for any screening purpose.
Behind the berm, is it, and that's area, is that visible from Denton and the cemetery? You know?
No, it's
not really. The farm is there still. Yep. So
Make sure I knew what we were, oh, I see it on the map. Yeah, I think it's an interesting idea. I'll be interested to see
Yeah, I think it's a
if we
great idea.
approve it, what it looks like in a year. I think I would recommend coming back and giving a how did it go report after a year, and then a full review after 2. And you do understand that if it doesn't come together, it's got to go back, right?
understand that. Yep.
And we want to take pictures.
Of course, obviously we want this to work, and we're offering it up if this works and does look how we hope it does, that we welcome you guys to come in and take pictures and share, and
Perhaps
and
copy it,
maybe
copy it in future. and
inspire more people.
Exactly. I think
Yep.
it might help, I don't know, want to say set a standard, but at least promote a standard, especially with the fact that, Van Buren Township is pretty unique. There's a lot of wildlife that probably a lot of people don't realize that we have in our township. Flocks of turkeys, and I see them every day, and deer flocks, and an occasional coyote running up and down the street. But we do have that. It'd be kind of nice to support that and maintain it.
So if I could just add onto that, then the reporting, interested in seeing the report on this project. I'm willing to try it as an experiment and
Yes.
see how it goes. If it goes well, we'll act on that information.
If the planning commission just wants to see something exactly done like this, take a look at the Canton Library. On the west side of the Canton Library, they have a ditch drain area. It is completely covered into a pollinator garden like this. It looks like a field of flowers. It's
That's
very
all,
beautiful. I
yeah.
want to see what happens to it in a few months. So I drive past there, I will take a look, but right now it looks absolutely beautiful. There are butterflies and birds and bees. It's very beautiful.
Through the chair.
Yes.
I have a couple of hopefully helpful questions. One's for the applicant. Just for clarification, and this will help me refine one of my recommended conditions. The idea is to maintain the trees and integrate those into the prairie landscaping, but the shrubs, I'm gathering some of those may be replaced, but there would be more of a native forbs and grasses and those kinds of plants in their place. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
so-
Yep. We
and my-
budgeted.
Okay, and so my report has shrubs listed as something we'd be trying to account for exact replacement. I'd recommend modifying that recommendation so that we can have a little bit more discretion to allow a broader mix of, it's probably going to be more like flowering plants and grasses as opposed to exact one-for-one ornamental shrub replacement in some areas. So if I could recommend that discretion by staff, and otherwise just seeing the updated landscaping plan with just the trees and the native planted areas. And then my second question would be to Commissioner Jar. On that recommendation, would you be looking for just an administrative update by staff in 1 year?
Exactly right.
Okay.
We, as planning commissioners, we drive around and we look at our community. We'll know what it looks like. But to have the formality of a year ago, we made this decision and this is how it's turned out could help us when we're doing other landscape plans to know what the direction of this project's going. And that's why that's why I would ask you for the formality of a report within a year.
When you say administrative, does that mean it doesn't make it in front of the planning commission, or it's just a report?
The administration will make a report to us instead of requiring Subaru to show up.
Yep.
Right, I
No,
figured
no
that as
action,
opposed to
presumably, if everything's going according to plan, there'd be no request you'd be acting on.
I think
He'd
that's
bring pictures and those types
That's
of
what we
things,
want, lots
yes.
of pretty pictures next year.
Me too.
It's not, it's great, yeah.
It's got lots of poppies and stuff, so it looks really nice.
Okay, do we have any other, any other discussion?
I don't think so.
Are we got any type of action on this?
Mr. Chair, I would
Sure.
normally look to my left and to my right to see if there was someone willing to make the motion, but in the effort of it being late, I'm just going to go ahead and move to grant the requested modifications to the landscaping plan for the development project known as Case 18021, which is located at 50255 Michigan Avenue, based on the analysis subject to the conditions in the letter of staff dated 8 June 2023, noting that the staff has discretion with regard to replacement of the shrubbery and trees.
And to keep the trees. So the trees are doing well and they're native. So anything that's thriving currently and is native and compatible, we're not just tearing stuff out for fun. The plan is to keep and reuse as much as we can that's thriving.
The additional condition that within 1 year of the project beginning, staff bring us a presentation to discuss the progress of the project. I humbly submit.
We have a motion by Commissioner Jar, supported by Commissioner Grant. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Sherry Budd? Brian Cullen?
Yes.
Bernard Grant? Jeff Jar? Jackson Paul?
Sir, you have it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Now it's time for
Now-
a really long general discussion.
Yes, do we have any general discussion items before us tonight?
Scheduled meeting is June 28th. It will be happening. July 12th, I'm not as sure about at this point, so stay tuned.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else have anything for the group? In that case, I would entertain
I
a
make
motion to
adjourn.
adjourn.
Support.
Good.
We have a motion and a support for adjournment. All in favor signify by aye. Opposed?
Aye, aye.
Better not be any. And we are concluded.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I know. And it is too bad, actually.